Welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
Oh, I've got quite the fun story for you today. It builds into one of the most tense and creepy ending sequences I've ever heard in a story on this show. This story is titled, I Met Her in the Rain, and it was sent to me by an anonymous sender. It's about a man who takes care of vacant homes along the coast, but a long rain brings something with it that seeps into his heart and leaves him changed forever. I'm Darkness Prevails, and this is Tales from the Break Room. Get more stories like this without ads and more over at Erie.fm by becoming a premium member. Help us keep our horror alive. Thank you. I took that job because my dad said I would never keep it. That isn't the whole reason, but it's most of it. I was 24 years old. I'd started a 2-year HVAC program at Clark College when I was 20, and I quit 8 weeks in. There was this warehouse job before that, and a tire shop job before that, and my dad kept a running total in his head. He's a diesel mechanic in Vancouver, Washington, 31 years at the same shop. He's never once in his life called in sick. At least, that's what he says. When I told him I was moving out to the coast in May to clean vacation rentals, he said, "Okay, good." Then he said he'd see me in August. He wasn't being mean about it. He was teasing. So I stayed past August. Then I stayed past September. By the next couple months, the summer crew broke up, and Sherry Voss, who owned the outfit I'd been cleaning for, asked if I wanted to move over to off-season maintenance, which was $19 an hour plus mileage instead of $17 and no mileage. I said yes before she finished the sentence. Kilchis Bay is a town of about 600 people on the North Oregon coast. There's a market and a gas station that closes at 7, and a church and a school, as well as a bar I went to twice. I rented a room over a garage from a woman named Gail for $450 a month. The room had its own outside stairs and a hot plate and a bathroom with a shower, but I did have to stand in the shower sideways to fit properly. The job was houses. 9 miles north of the town, there's a development called Sea Ridge that somebody put up in 2006 or 2007. 22 houses on 4 streets, all built by the same outfit off of 3 floor plans. Scattered around the outside of that were the older places, on Cormorant Lane and Up Bell Road, houses from the 60s and 70s that people had bought and updated and rented out. Sherry managed 31 of them on a weekly check, and another 12 on a quarterly, and every single one of them sat empty from the second week of October to spring break, except for the odd Thanksgiving or a New Year's rental. What I did was keep them from rotting, basically. That's really what it was. A house on the Oregon coast that nobody lives in for 5 months will try to eat itself. So I'd let myself in with the lockbox code, and I'd run every faucet for about 30 seconds, because if the water sitting in the P-traps under the sinks evaporates, then sewer gas comes up through the drain, and it can make the whole house smell like a septic tank by March. I'd flush every toilet for the same reason. I'd check the thermostat was holding at 55. I'd go down on my hands and knees at the crawlspace hatch with a flashlight and look for standing water, and I'd look at the ceilings for stains, as well as empty the dehumidifiers. The dehumidifiers really were the whole job. Sherry had bought a pile of the same model, a white one with a plastic tank in the front that pulls out like a drawer. In a normal winter, you'd empty it every few days. Then I'd fill out a sheet on the clipboard, 1 line per house, and read the whole thing off to Sherry on the phone at the end of the day, so she would have it for her records. As a bonus, Sherry did everything on paper because she was 61 and did not know how to use apps. Manny Ocampo had the older houses, and I had Sea Ridge. Manny was 50-something and quiet. He had a granddaughter he talked about constantly whenever we were near each other. But the guy up and quit on the 19th of December because his daughter in Salem needed some help, and Sherry, I guess, never decided to replace him. So from December on, I had all of it. 31 houses. The 12 quarterly ones just sat in the back of the binder and I never got to them. And Sherry said, "Don't worry about it. Get to them when you get to them." If it had been a normal job, I'd have been home every night. But then the rain really started in January. Rain on the coast in winter isn't news. It can rain from Halloween to damn near Easter, and everybody's used to it. Nobody really brings it up, not in a serious way. What made this one different, though, was that it literally didn't stop. It never let up overnight, and it never gave you an hour in the afternoon to get a load of stuff out to the truck, not without it and your collar getting soaked. It came in one weekend, and it was still coming down 19 days later when I left. By about 3 or 4 days in, the marsh had come up over Highway 101 at the low spot, about 2 miles north of town. At high tide, there was 8 or 10 inches of brown water across both lanes, with cattails standing up in it, so the local government had to put out sawhorses, and the only other route from Kilchis Bay to Sea Ridge was the Ridge Road, which is gravel and climbs up over the ridge in a lot of tight, blind turns. It takes 50 minutes, if you don't meet a log truck. At the same time, my workload roughly tripled. Every crawl space had water in it. Every dehumidifier tank was full, and when they're full, they shut themselves off and do nothing. So if I let a house go too long, I'd come back to a shut-off machine, and mold blooming on the north wall of the master bedroom. Sherry was calling me twice a day by then. The owners were calling her from Phoenix and Boise, wanting to know if their houses were okay. And she'd tell them, "Danny's out there right now." And Danny was out there. So, on that day when the marsh flooded, I had an idea, one that kept me from having to drive back. The idea came to me when I was completely exhausted. I finished down at Sea Ridge Drive around 9 at night, and I sat in my truck in the driveway, visualizing that 50-minute drive up gravel in the dark with all that rain. So I just walked back inside the house I'd been working on. I slept on top of the comforter with my jacket over me and my boots by the door. In the morning, I pulled the comforter straight, wiped down the counter, took my trash out with me in the truck. Nobody was the wiser. Then I did it the next night at a different house, and the night after that. Now, don't get the wrong idea. This was a firing-level offense. Sherry trusted me with 43 sets of lockbox codes. If an owner had driven up unannounced and found some kid asleep in their bed, that's the company and her insurance and her whole business on the line. I told myself the road was closed, which was mostly true at high tide, and I told myself I was saving the owner's money and mileage, which was also true, but I never told Sherry, or even my dad, that I was doing that. By then, my dad and I were on a schedule of one phone call every couple weeks, which was usually about his health or his truck. So nobody on Earth knew what house I was in at any given moment. Including me, half the time, because those Sea Ridge houses are the same house. The flooring is the same gray plank in every one of them, and the cabinets are the same white, and there's always this framed photo of a sand dollar in the hallway that is, I'm not exaggerating, the same photo, 22 times, across different houses. The 3 floor plans are the same plan with the stairs on the left or the right, or the garage might be flipped. I'd wake up at 2 in the morning and have to think for a second about which side of the bed the bathroom was on. I started to leave one lamp on, the floor lamp in the front room, whichever house I was in. Coming back at night off the Ridge Road, there's a long, slow bend where you can see the whole development spread out below you, and every window would be black except one. That would be the one I was staying in. It was a nice thing to have. Something about it made the whole arrangement feel less like trespassing and more like coming home. This brings me to the story you've probably been waiting for. So the first thing I couldn't explain happened at the end of the week, 6 days into that rain, on Bell Road. Bell Road was Manny's designation formerly. It's an older house, cedar shakes gone black, built into the hill so the downstairs is half underground. That house was my worst one for water. The dehumidifier down there filled its tank in about 14 hours, and I'd go back there every day. I came in around 3 in the afternoon, soaked through, and I went straight down to the lower level. The machine was running with its green light on and the fan going. When I pulled the tank out, it was empty and dry. For a second, I just stood there. A dry tank on a running machine means somebody had to have emptied it, recently enough that no condensate had come off the coil yet. And in that house on that day, that meant within about half an hour. I put the tank back and went upstairs, checking the front door. It was locked. Same with the sliding door and with the garage side door. Nothing appeared to be out of place. I didn't see any wet footprints, though I hadn't left any either, because I'd taken my boots off at the door, which was a habit of mine. The only thing I found was in the back bedroom. That bed was made up with a quilt, and there was a dent in it. A body-length dent, hip deep, right down in the middle, like when someone lies down on top of a made bed long enough to leave an impression. And when I put my hand on it, the quilt was dry and warm. The rest of that house was so damp the paperbacks on the shelf had gone wavy. I decided Manny had a key. That's what I settled on. Manny lived in Salem now, but maybe he had come back for some reason or another. Or maybe there was a neighbor with a key, or maybe Sherry had somebody else out there and had not told me. I actually texted her that night, asking if anyone else was going into Bell Road. She wrote back, "No, just you. Why?" And I wrote back, "No reason. Thought I saw tire tracks." That would be the first lie I told about it. And there would be more. I saw the woman the first time the next evening, from the deck of one of these Sea Ridge houses. This particular house sits at the end of the row with nothing between it and the beach, except a strip of shore pine and a public access stair. I'd gone out on the deck to get a signal, because the cell service out there was garbage in the rain, and I was standing under the eave with my phone up. There was a woman down on the sand. She was about 200 yards off, down toward the creek mouth, standing still with the surf coming in behind her. She wore a green rain jacket, and her hair was dark. Even that far away, I could tell she was young, and I remember thinking she was probably pretty, which is a stupid thing to be able to tell at 200 yards. But maybe it was something about the way she stood. I thought, who in God's name is out walking in this? I went back in and did the downstairs. I then came back out about half an hour later. She was still there, in the same spot, standing in the rain facing the water. Her hands were down at her sides. I wasn't scared of her, no reason to be. I was curious, though. I hadn't had a conversation with someone under 50 since Manny left. I thought about going down the access stair, saying something, but I chickened out. It's a mile of empty beach, and a strange guy walking up to you in the rain is not a nice thing to have happen. When I came back out a third time, the woman was gone. 2 nights after that, I saw 2 lamps. I'd gone into town for some pizza. It's a bigger deal than it sounds because the Ridge Road took 50 minutes each way and the pizza place shut at 8. So it was around 9, and I'm coming down the bend with my pizza, where the whole development opens up below you. And at my designated house, the lamp was on where I'd left it. But there's another light on 2 streets over. I sat in my truck at the bottom of the drive with the pizza on the passenger seat, and I looked over at it. It was the upstairs window on the north side. It was one of the houses I'd been at that same morning. I'm not a brave guy, but I was on the hook for these houses. My whole head at the moment was full of very specific and very boring fears. Did I leave a light on? If I'd left a light on, I might have left other things, and Sherry pulls the electric bills. So I drove over and I let myself in. I stood in the entry and yelled hello a couple of times, and I felt stupid doing it. The house was cold, 55 on the dot, and it smelled like those cheap plug-in air fresheners that Sherry buys in bulk. I went up the stairs, and the light was the bedside lamp in the north bedroom, on, with the shade slightly crooked. There was nothing there. The bed was made and the closet was empty except for some hangers. Nobody under it, because I looked. I will say, though, there's a certain feeling you get when you're 24 years old, on your belly, looking under a bed, with a flashlight in your teeth. It harkens back to being a child and asking Dad to look under your bed because the boogeyman is there. I turned off the lamp. I left and ate my pizza, which was now borderline cold. Now, the thing that stuck with me, though, is that I had done my walkthrough of that house at about 10 that morning. I remembered clearly being in that bedroom, because in that floor plan, the north bedroom is where the ceiling stain was that I'd been tracking for Sherry every week, penciling a line at the edge of it and writing the date to see if it was growing. And I remembered turning that lamp off this morning, especially because the switch is one of those little wheels on the cord. I remembered my hands being wet, so I had to try twice. So, who turned it back on? On day 10 of the onslaught of rain, I finished at the house at the end of the beach access. I went out to my truck and there was a girl sitting on the bottom step of the public stair. Her hood was down in the rain, and she was eating an apple of all things. She looked up at me and said, "You're the guy that goes in all these houses." Yep, you got me. I'm the guy," she replied. "I thought you were robbing these places at first. If that was the case, you'd be horrible at it, because you take like an hour." Her name was Nell. She was 26, which she told me before I asked. Do you live around here? I said, because nobody really lives around here. My aunt's place, over on Cormorant. She tipped her head in that direction. She goes down to Arizona in October and comes back in April. Somebody's got to run the water and get the mail off the porch. That's basically my job. Yeah, except I do one house and you do 40. And obviously I don't get paid. She took a bite. Green Valley, that's where she is. She says there's about 900 Oregon people down there and all they do is play cards. I asked what she did when she wasn't running the water at her aunt's. She said she was still figuring that out. Then she stopped. There was an awkward silence for a couple of seconds, so I felt pressured to say something. I explained to her that I'd started HVAC school at Clark and lasted 8 weeks, and that my dad kept a list of the jobs I had, temporarily. She nodded the whole time I was talking. I was a dental assistant, she said eventually. Spokane, for 4 years. I just walked out during one lunch break and never went back. Oh, so you quit? Quit. She turned the apple around, looking for a good side. Everybody I know who finished a program hates their life. I laughed a bit harder than the joke was worth. I don't think I'd laughed at all since October. Nell had a chipped front tooth, upper left, a little corner off of it. She caught me looking and tapped it with a fingernail. Swing set, she said. I was 9 years old, and I went face first into the chain. We sat at the bottom of the stairs for nearly an hour, with the rain coming down on both of us, neither one of us doing much about it. When I finally said I had 4 more houses, she stood up and brushed off the back of her jeans. Hey, tomorrow you should tell me which one you'll be at, she said, so I don't have to sit on a step like a stray dog. I gave her the address that night. 3 days later, I gave her the code. I was in bad shape by then, and I had never noticed it. I'd been alone since October. There was Sherry on the phone about crawl spaces and whatnot. There was a guy named Roy at the market who says about 9 words a day, and 4 of them are, "You want a bag?" A woman named Gail I saw once a month when I paid rent. At this point, I was going a little crazy, starting to talk to myself out loud in the houses as I worked. It wasn't crazy talk, honestly. It was just, okay, upstairs, to nobody, just to have a voice in the room. But then I had a girl show up out of the rain. A girl who thought my job was funny, and that my life was interesting. And I fell for her about as fast as it is possible for a person to fall for someone. Just 4 days at the most is how long it took. On day 4, I was already thinking about spring, where she'd go then, and whether she would stay for me. Those next few days were the best days I'd had out there. She'd come find me at whatever house I'd told her about. Sometimes she'd already be inside when I came back from the truck, sitting sideways in an armchair with her legs over the arm, reading a paperback book she'd taken off a shelf. She read other people's vacation paperbacks the whole time I knew her, but I don't think she finished a single one. She'd get like 60 pages in one and leave it face down and start another one at the next house. She helped me sometimes too. Not with the crawl spaces, she wasn't going down there. But she'd go around and run the faucets while I did the dehumidifier thing, and she was fast at it. One night I came upstairs and she'd already flushed all 3 toilets and set the thermostat back. Then she said, "You're welcome. I've cut 11 minutes off your life." We drove into town twice on the Ridge Road. The second time we got sandwiches at the market, those turkey ones that Roy's wife makes and wraps in white paper. We sat in my truck in the gravel lot with the wipers going, and we enjoyed them. I noticed something at the time and thought it was funny. We were chewing at the same speed. Exactly the same speed. I would take a bite, she would take a bite, and our jaws were just synced up. And when I swallowed, she swallowed. I noticed it. Then I did it on purpose for a second and slowed way down and chewed like a cow. She slowed down too without ever looking at me. I laughed and said we shared the same brain cell. And she said, "Oh, are you watching my mouth when I eat?" and shoved my shoulder. There were other things I noticed and filed away as nothing at the time. She yawned when I yawned every single time within about a second. Anybody will tell you yawns are contagious, so that one didn't even register as a thing until later. Her hair was always dry. She had a green rain jacket, and the shoulders of it would be dark with water, and there would be droplets on her eyelashes. but the hair on top of her head would be dry as a bone. I assumed her hood had been up. That's what I assumed for those days. She never had a car either. Cormorant Lane to Sea Ridge is about 1.5 miles of shoulderless road with log trucks on it, and she apparently walked it in the dark and in that rain, both directions. When I offered to drive her, she always said she liked walking, so I let it go. Again, a lonely 24-year-old guy I was. A girl was walking 1.5 miles through January storm to sit in a room with me, and that made me feel special. She never told me anything about herself that I hadn't told her first. That aspect I didn't put together for months. Sitting in my dad's basement in Vancouver in the spring, I went back over it. I'd say I dropped out of a program, and she would later tell me she dropped out of something. I said my parents split when I was 12 years old, and a couple days later she said her parents split when she was 11. I said the thing I missed the most was my grandma's house in Ridgefield. I explained how it smelled, and 2 days later she was telling me about her grandma's place in Colville. Cedar chest, she said, and coffee that had been sitting on the burner since breakfast. Everything about her, everything she would say was a mirror or a bounce back off of something I'd said. And I never caught it, because at the time I really thought it was just us having a lot in common, like I'd found the perfect woman. The night after the sandwiches was when I gave her the code. It came up naturally. "So, where are you going to be tomorrow?" she asked. 4212. "If I get there first, I stand out in the rain." 4409, I told her. "Oh, is that the code?" I nodded. "That's the code to all of them, isn't it?" I shook my head. "They're all different, actually. That one's just 4409. "Huh," she said, then went back to her book. After that, I gave her one almost every day. I'd say the address and the 4 digits, and she'd repeat them back to me once and never write them down and never got them wrong. Every night I did that, every single night, just handing over access to this woman. Day 14. I was at 4207. It was the house with the ceiling stain and the crooked lamp. I hadn't really wanted to sleep there, but the tank in that house was the second worst on the whole rotation, and I could not justify the drive. Nell had come over around 7 with a bag of the powdered donuts they sell at the gas station. We'd eaten most of them on the living room floor, with our backs against the couch. Around 11, she got up and said she was going to use the bathroom. I heard the door shut down the hall. The upstairs hallway runs 14 feet from the top of the stairs to the master door. I know the number well. I'd put tape on it in October, checking a baseboard gap for Sherry. I went up to get my phone charger. I got to the top of the stairs, and there was a woman standing at the other end. She was beautiful, young, 20-something, with dark hair and clear skin and a green jacket. She was standing there with her hands at her sides, looking at me. And she looked healthy. She looked completely and totally fine. But every single hair on my body stood straight up. I couldn't have told you why in that moment. All I knew was that my legs had gone loose, my mouth had gone dry. My entire body understood something my head was about 2 seconds behind on. Because at 14 feet, you can see a person's pores. You can see whether they blink or not. She was 14 feet away, and she looked like someone standing at the far end of a soccer field, smoothed out and filled in and too even. I said her name. "Nell?" I began to walk up towards her. I took 4 steps, but somehow, the door at the end, the woman ahead of me, neither of them got closer. The framed sand dollar on the right-hand wall was still on my right, at my shoulder. I should have passed it, but it was still there. I stopped. I remember reaching out and putting my hand flat on the wall because it felt like the floor below me had disappeared. Then she smiled at me. A nice smile. That's when I heard a toilet flush. The bathroom door opened on my left, 4 feet away from me, and Nell came out drying her hands on her jeans, saying, "What are you doing?" And the hallway was 14 feet long again, and there was nobody at the end of it. I told her I'd gotten dizzy. She got me a glass of water and made me sit down on the stairs. She sat 2 steps below me with her hand on my knee. When did you last eat something that wasn't a donut? I had to actually think about it. There was a burrito. When? Yesterday. You've gone white, she said. Sit there. If the room starts spinning again, put your head down. She was kind about it, so nice to me. She never asked if I'd seen something. But if you find a guy standing in a hallway with his hand flat on the wall saying a name and looking up, you usually ask what he saw. But she asked what I'd eaten. The next afternoon, I was upstairs at 4118, the Ind House, at the big window in the master bedroom that looks out over the pines to the beach. Nell had gone down the access stair to look for glass floats, which she claimed washed up there, and which I'm now certain she'd never once looked for before I mentioned my grandma collected them. She was down on the sand about 150 yards out. She turned around and waved up at the window with both arms over her head, the big wave you do for someone far away. In the glass behind my own reflection, there was a woman standing in the bedroom. It was dark enough outside and bright enough inside that the glass had gone half mirror, with the bedroom laid over the beach. She was about 8 feet back near the closet, and pale. Her face was a gray-green, and the skin of it had come loose around her hairline, so there was a gap there. Her mouth was open, and the jaw hung crooked on one side, lower on the left, and her teeth were long, due to the gums pulling back off of them. I turned around so fast, I hit my elbow on the window frame. But when I did, the room was empty. The closet doors were shut, and the carpet still had the vacuum lines on it. What I thought, standing there with my elbow ringing, was, thank God. Because Nell was down on the beach. I'd been looking right at her in the same second that I saw that figure, the figure that had looked like her last time. This time they were in 2 completely different places. So maybe, whatever that gray thing was, it's not her, I thought, and has nothing to do with her, and I could go downstairs and hug her and everything would be fine. Seeing 2 of them at once means there's 2 of them. Late afternoon on the 16th day, I was at 4133 finishing up. I'd stepped out the slider onto the deck to dump a bucket over the rail. The sun was starting to set. The beach was empty except for something down by the creek mouth. I saw a person standing still down there facing the water, 200 yards away, same spot as the very first time I saw it. And I could see her face. I should not have been able to see her face that well from that distance. But just like the staircase incident, distance somehow warped. Because I could tell that the left side of her face had gone, and the socket had collapsed, so that the eye sat lower than the other. I could see the color of her skin, a mix of seafoam green and something pale and gross. Her hair was off her scalp in patches, and the hinge of her jaw was hanging. That was 200 yards, in the rain at sundown. You cannot see a person's eye socket at 200 yards. You can barely see if someone's got a hat on at that distance. So how was I able to see that? And what I saw made me so frightened that I hope I never feel that way again. What my gut told me, despite what my eyes saw, was that this thing was not 200 yards away. It only looked that way, but was much, much closer. I ran back inside and locked the slider, which wouldn't do much if someone really wanted to get inside. I stood in the kitchen and trembled. I went and got my duffel bag, and I threw my stuff in it, ready to leave. I'd sleep in the truck at Gale's. I would tell Sherry the roads were bad. I was just done tonight. Nell was standing in the front room by the lamp. I hadn't heard her come in. She said, "Where are you going with that?" I told her everything. I started with the dry tank at Bell Road, going right through the lamp and the beach and the hallway, standing there with a duffel bag in my hand, like some kid running away from home. She didn't laugh, and she didn't seem scared. She put her hands in her jacket pockets and thought for a second, then said, "How many of these houses are empty right now?" All of them. 43. 43 houses with nobody in them. She let that sit for a moment. Do any of them have a busted window? A door that doesn't latch? Probably. Bell Road's got a sliding door that sticks. So, somebody's living out here. I began to say something, but she kept going. Look, it's January. It's the end of the road, and it's been raining for 2 weeks straight. If there's a woman out here sleeping in one of these houses, what do you think she looks like by now? She'll look bad, rough, exactly as bad as what you're telling me. But her face was... You saw her at 200 yards. It wasn't fully dark yet, though. Well, it was dusk in a rainstorm. She crouched in front of me, so she was looking up at me. You've been getting up at 5. You've been doing 11-hour days for multiple weeks. You told me you talk out loud in these houses because it's too quiet in them. Your head is just filling things in, Danny. It's filling them in with the worst things it's got, and that's a completely normal thing for a head to do in your situation. I was wordless. If you drive that road tonight in this, you're going to put the truck in the ditch on a blind turn. No one's going to find you till Monday. I put the duffel bag down. That's the moment. If there's one moment I'd take back, it's that one. And you'll soon understand why. I'd been sleeping through the rain for 2 weeks. Those Sea Ridge houses have shallow attics and a hard roof, so it was loud in there. And it seemed to get louder when the wind came around. After a couple of days, you stop hearing it. The same as you would stop hearing your refrigerator hum. I woke up at some point in the dark because it was gone. It wasn't quieter, it was just gone. I could hear the blood in my own ears. I lay there and thought the storm had finally broke, and I was actually happy for about 4 seconds. Then I sat up, and I could hear it. It was hammering. It was absolutely coming down out there. I could hear it on the roof over the hallway and on the roof over the far bedroom. I could hear it hitting the deck downstairs and running in the gutter and coming off the downspout onto the gravel. Everywhere, except the room I was in. Over that one room, the roof was silent, and the sound started again right at the doorway. At the time, Nell was asleep beside me on her side, facing away. I got up and went to the doorway and stood with my head in the hall. It was loud out there. I then moved away 8 inches, pulling my head back into the room. It was gone. I did this 3 or 4 times to be sure. I put my ear against the wall, and there was nothing on that side of it. I figured there had to be something up in the attic over that room. Insulation pushed around, or a tarp, or something somebody left up there. I got the flashlight, and I stood on the bed, going over the ceiling looking for the access hatch. There wasn't one in that bedroom, but there was a hatch out in the hallway. I got back in bed because the only other option was to be somewhere else in that house alone. I didn't want to do that. I lay there with my eyes open until it came back. And it did. It came back all at once. I looked at my phone then. It was 4:51 a.m. Nell rolled over about a minute later, placing her arm over me, saying, "You're freezing," with her eyes shut. It was day 17 of that non-stop rain. I did 9 houses. My hands had been wet for so long that the skin on my fingertips had gone soft and white. I ate a gas station burrito for lunch, standing up in some stranger's kitchen. Sherry called and told me an owner in Chandler, Arizona was threatening to pull his house from the program because of a mildew smell, asking if I could put some vinegar on it. I said sure, and I did. Nell met me at 4319 that evening. We lay on the couch and watched about 90 minutes of a movie on my laptop with the sound on low, and I fell asleep with my head on her chest. I could hear her heartbeat. It was slow and steady. I just lay there listening to it before falling asleep, and after a while I noticed something. It was beating exactly along with mine. It wasn't near or roughly mine, but every beat was at the same time as one of mine. I've had my head on somebody's chest before. I've never heard a heartbeat do that. I thought, two people's hearts can't just line up like that. But because I was half asleep and stupid and happy, I tested it and held my breath. If you hold your breath, your heart slows down. When I did that, I felt my heart rate go down a little bit. I held it until my chest hurt. About 50 seconds, I think. And the whole time her heart came down with mine, step for step, beat for beat, until it was going at that low, heavy pace. Then I let go, taking a big breath. My beats and hers came back up at the same time. I lifted my head and looked at her. She was watching the movie with her chin tucked down, and she looked at me, saying, "What?" "Nothing," I said, and I laid my head back down. Something was wrong, and I didn't want it to be real. I woke up in the middle of the night at around 2:30. I wasn't sure what woke me. Nell was on her side facing away from me on the other half of the bed, about 1.5 feet of space between us. There was that little bit of light you get, even in a storm at night. And she was laughing. It was quiet and low, like a little laugh you do when you're remembering something funny. 3 or 4 laughs, then a pause, then 3 or 4 more. It was completely relaxed and completely normal sounding. But it terrified me in that moment. You see, when you laugh, your body moves. Your ribs, shoulders, your back, even a small laugh is noticeable by other people. But as I heard this laugh coming from her, her body was absolutely still. I was looking at her shoulder against the window, and her back under the blanket, and the sound was coming out of her, I was sure of it. And yet no part of her moved. I did not move, and I tried not to breathe too loudly. This went on for quite some time. I want to say 4 or 5 minutes, but I have no idea truthfully. Eventually it did stop, and she said something then, though I couldn't tell you what it was exactly. It didn't sound like words. After that, there was nothing. I lay there until it got light. Then I got up and did my houses as usual. If you're asking why I didn't run then, it was because I was in love. And when you're in love, you can ignore so many red flags. I had my last night at 4212 Sea Ridge Drive. Nell was inside by the time I got there. Of course she was. She was in the kitchen with the paper bag she'd started at the last house. She'd made tea in one of the mugs from the cabinet, which I would have gotten in trouble for if Sherry found out. We had a nice night. That's what really kills me here. We had a great night. She was funny. She made fun of my clipboard. "So, what happens to you in April?" she asked. "When everyone comes back?" Sherry says there's turnover work, cleaning between rentals. "And if there isn't?" "Then I go home, I guess." She was quiet for a second. "I don't want you to go home," she said. At one point, she was standing at the counter. I came up behind her, placing my arms around her. She leaned back into me. It was the most comfortable I'd ever felt in my life. We went to bed around midnight. I fell asleep on my back, and I don't remember having any dreams. When I woke up, I was on my side against her back, with my arm over her, my knees behind her knees. My face was right in the back of her hair, and the room was black except for the little green light on the smoke detector. But there was something wrong. I could feel breath hitting my face. It was slow and warm, coming in a rhythm, right on my cheek and nose, very close. My eyes were open and I was looking at the back of her head from about 3 inches away. How could there be breathing on my face? It wasn't a moment of dawning horror at the time. My brain was extremely calm and extremely slow. I thought about the smoke detector, whether it could be a fan or a vent. I thought about my own breath coming back at me off the pillow, and about the window, whether it was cracked and we didn't realize it. I went through all these explanations, one at a time, lying perfectly still, and every single one of those explanations did not hold up. I could feel that breathing, moving the little hairs by my ear. Her back was against my chest. I could feel her. I could feel her shoulder blade against my sternum, and my arm was over her ribs. And I was beginning to realize that something only a few inches from my face was breathing in and out, with a slight catch on the inhale, like somebody with a cold. I did the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life. I didn't know what else to do in that situation, but I had to know. Anyone would have to know. I didn't decide to do it, my hand just did it. I lifted my hand off her ribs, slowly so as not to wake her, and I reached up, putting my fingers into the hair at the back of her head, and gently, I began to part it. She was smiling at me. There was a face underneath her hair, a face on the back of her head. It was under the hair, about where the base of her skull should be. It was her face, the real one, the one I knew with the chipped corner on her upper left tooth. Her eyes were wide open. They were staring at me. They'd been on me the whole time, waiting for me to part that hair. Only inches away in the dark, wide open, she was smiling so wide that the skin at the corners of her eyes was creased, and the breath came out of her mouth onto mine. My fingers were in her hair on either side, holding it open. Then she spoke. "Hi." I pulled my hand out of her hair quickly, and the hair fell shut over it, becoming just the back of her head again. I went backward off that bed like a bullet, hard enough that I came down on the floor on my tailbone, and I could feel it up in my teeth. Then I kept going, pushing back on my hands and my heels until I was against the wall under the window. There was nowhere else to go. I could hardly get a breath in. I'd never had that happen before. I was pulling at the air and none of it was getting down. Then she sat up. She did it so slowly, no jolt to it, no surprise. She rose up without facing me, and when she was fully upright, she stayed that way for a couple of seconds, her shoulders square and her head straight. Then she went forward on hands and knees on the mattress and started across the bed away from me, toward the far side. I was down on the floor with my back on the wall, so my eyes were about level with the top of the mattress. All I could see of her was her head and the top of her back going across. She never turned around, not for a second of it, and I never saw the front of her. She made it to the far edge, and she went over. That's a drop of about 2 feet onto carpet. A grown person coming down off a bed onto their hands and knees will make a sound, whether they want to or not. But I didn't hear anything at all. I was sitting low enough to see straight under that bed. Those beds sit up off the floor about 8 inches, and there's nothing under them. No drawers, no storage boxes, no bed skirt, just carpet and the 4 legs. Trust me, I've been under those beds in that development with a flashlight, looking for mouse droppings, wet spots, and mold. So I had a clear view of 8 inches of open carpet running the whole way across to the far wall. But nothing came down onto it. No hands, no knees, no falling knell. I watched her go over that edge, and I never saw her come down. Then, nothing happened for a long time. The only light in that room was the green one on the smoke detector. My eyes were well adjusted to the lack of light, but still heavily depended on the blinks it gave off about every 30 seconds. And I know I sat there through several of those blinks. I then thought about the door. The door was on the same wall I was against, down at the other end, and getting to it meant standing up and crossing the open floor at the foot of the bed. I couldn't do it. I don't know if it was fear, or if it was the idea that getting to that knob meant I would have to turn my back to the far side of that room. I got chills then, just imagining it. I kept looking under the bed instead, over and over, and it was the same emptiness every time. All I knew was where she wasn't. I forced myself up then, because I had to know where she went. I did it slow, keeping my hand on the wall as I went up. My legs were a mess. I made it back to my side of the bed, placing my hand on the footboard, and I stopped. Going around the corner of it meant walking into the strip of floor on her side, and that I still couldn't see into. A few feet of carpet between the bed and the wall, and I'd be standing in it before I could look at it. So I crawled back up onto the bed instead. I put one knee on the mattress, and the whole thing dipped. The frame made a noise, and I stopped. I waited, and nothing happened. I then put another knee on it. I crawled out to about the middle of it on my hands and knees, over the sheet, over the dent where the two of us had been lying 20 minutes before. And the closer I got to her side, the slower I went. I got to the edge. I put one hand down on the mattress right at the seam, and I leaned over her side of the bed, looking at the floor. There was carpet, and there was the leg of the nightstand, and there was no one down there. At that exact moment, I felt breath on the back of my neck. I screamed. I've never made that sound before. Didn't even know I could. I came off that mattress and got myself turned around at the same time. I was expecting to be looking straight at her. But there was nothing on that bed. The sheet was pushed down where the two of us had been, and there was a dent in her pillow. But that was all. I hurried over to the door, backing up to it so I could face the room. I put my back flat against that door. I scoured that room with my eyes. I took my time doing it. I wasn't going into a dark hallway or staying in there any longer without knowing where she went. It's not a big room. I'm not sure how you're imagining it, but it's not a very big room. There's the bed, a dresser with nothing on it, and about 4 feet of open floor down either side. Then there's the closet. That's the whole room. The closet doors were shut. Surely she couldn't be in there. I stood with my back on that door for a minute or two, looking at the closet, scared the doors would fly open and there she would be, gliding towards me. But that didn't happen. All the while I was working up the courage to open the door behind me. But that courage didn't come. Not yet. So I stayed put, standing there, watching every inch of that room that I could. I then reached over sideways, without taking my eyes off of that room. I felt around until I found it. The light switch. I flicked it. The light came on. This wasn't some scary movie where the lights suddenly don't come on. The place had power just fine, and the light came on as it should. There was nothing in the room. Just furniture. Bed, dresser, carpet, 2 closet doors. Everything as it should be. It was so ordinary and empty, and now I could see every bit of it all at once. I put my shoulder blades back on that door, and I got some breath into me at last. I remember thinking in those exact words that I was going to be okay, until 2 hands came over my shoulders from behind me. My back was on that door. My shoulder blades were touching it. I had been standing against it for a couple of minutes by then. There was nothing behind me but a closed door. Those hands came down over the front of my shoulders, onto my chest. They were wet, and it wasn't water. There was something on them with thickness to it. Those hands dragged across my skin, and I could feel my skin going tacky where it touched me. And that smell came at the same time. That smell of what washes up on the beach after a storm and just lies there in a line on the sand for weeks. Then both hands came up off my chest, and the fingers went in my mouth. I didn't have time to do anything about it. They went in past my teeth, and I felt the knuckles on my tongue, and I felt one of them at the back of my throat. It tasted like a crab pot that's been sitting out in the sun. I went forward. I don't know if I jumped or if my legs did it without me. I came down on hands and knees on the carpet in front of the bed, and I began to vomit. But nothing came up. I kept heaving anyway, 4 or 5 times, my head hanging down and my hands flat on the floor. I turned around then and looked back at the door. There was nobody there, of course there wasn't, and the door was still shut. I stayed down there heaving and spitting on the carpet, not bringing anything up. At that moment, I wasn't paying any attention at all to where I was in that room. I'd gone forward maybe 6 feet. My back was nearly touching the end of the bed. But then the light started to go. I thought it was the light bulb, that the bulb was going out on me all of a sudden. Darkness came down from the top of my vision, and it was coming down slow and even all the way across. It took me a second to realize. It was hair. Hair came down over my face from right above me, and it kept coming. It went past my eyes and down my chin. She was up on that bed right behind me, leaning out over the top, just over my head. She spoke only one more word, and that word was, "Stay." I practically tackled the door then, barging into it full force before I ever got the knob turned. I put my shoulder into it, and the top corner went in. One of the hinges tore out of the jamb with a sound like a board coming off a pallet. Then it was open. I was in the hallway. I ran down the stairs, missing the last 3, and coming down on my side on the floor at the bottom. I got up. My keys were on the kitchen counter where I'd left them. I ran out the front door after grabbing them, and I got into the truck, driving as fast as I could. Throughout all of this, I was in my underwear. No shoes, no jacket. The entire way up the ridge road, I kept feeling something behind the seat. I wasn't hearing anything, and I never once looked back in the mirror. I don't know what I would have done if I had. It was on the back of my neck and across the top of my shoulders. I'd put my hand back there and feel nothing, but then 30 seconds later it would be there again. I did this the entire way over the ridge, taking those blind turns way too fast in the dark, one hand constantly going behind my own head, over and over. I got to Gale's a little before 6, going up the outside stairs. I put some clothes on, and I did that without turning on a single light. I was in too much of a hurry, too scared. Problem was, my wallet was on the nightstand at 4212, the house I had just run away from. I knew exactly where it was, but I wasn't going back for it. There was about $60 cash in the drawer by the sink at my place, so I took that. I didn't leave Gale a note, and I didn't call Sherry. I drove straight to my dad's, arriving a little after 10 in the morning. He opened the door and looked at me and said, "Okay," and stepped back to let me in. Somebody had to go out to 4212 to fix that door. That's a hinge and probably the jamb and probably the whole slab. It would be coming out of Sherry's pocket, or out of the owner's. But I wasn't going back there. I still owe her for the door. Well, that was a first. A love story / work story / ghost story? And I don't know about all of you, but that gave me some serious Obsession vibes. If any of you have not seen that movie yet, go do it. It's freaking creepy, and a fun ride. I never knew a 5-foot woman could be so creepy, till that movie and apparently this story. Good night. Thank you all so much for tuning into this episode of Tales from the Break Room. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. You can send me your scary work-related stories over at eeriecast.com/submit. And you can support the show by becoming a member over at erie.fm, where you can listen to all our shows without ads if you're a premium member, and unlock hours of bonus stories, podcasts, and audiobooks. Your membership helps us stay afloat, and it's very, very much appreciated. Till next time, everyone, I've got to clock out, but I'll be back again real soon.
Hi, welcome to Dead and Roasted. What can I get you?
When I was a kid, I was always jealous of the kids who could just walk home from school. They didn't have to wait on their bus or on their parents. They'd be back home in a few minutes, enjoying a fruit roll-up, and could actually catch the cool after-school cartoons. Not me though, my bus ride took an hour. That never changed, you see, because some folks still walk to and from work these days. And tonight I've got a story for you about one Swedish listener who took a walk home after a stormy night, only to realize he's not alone, and his companion is very tall and very quiet. That story and more in today's episode. These are Tales from the Break Room. Before we begin, I wanted to tell you that you can help EerieCast and Tales from the Break Room stay alive no matter what, and you can listen to exclusive stories narrated by me that you've never heard before. All you have to do is head over to eerie.fm and sign up to be a premium member. I've prepared dozens of hours of members-only horror just for you over there, like a brand new Unexplained Encounters After Hours story about a possibly haunted bag of dog bones. Every premium member is a supporter helping us thrive. Thank you to everyone who has signed up so far. You are incredible. And by the way, you look good enough for a promotion here at Dead and Roasted. That's EERIE.fm. There was something else on sonar. From Curtis TVA. Inland diving is the part of commercial diving that no one wants. The water in the lakes and the rivers I worked has zero visibility. You usually have to work by feel. The current will kill you if the sluice gates open wrong, and the cold will kill you on its own if your suit fails. I did inland work for 12 years out of East Tennessee, and I'm not going to do it again. I worked a lot of jobs for TVA, which is what Tennessee Valley Authority gets called by people who work for it. The dam jobs are bread and butter for inland divers in our part of the country. We do debris clearance on the intake trash racks, or inspection of the spillway gates and such. The water in most of those reservoirs has 6 inches of visibility at the surface and 10 feet down. You go in on a stage and get lowered to depth, and you work in pitch black with a comms umbilical to the tinder on the surface. My tinder for most of my career was a guy I'll call Roger for the sake of this story. Roger was good. He was clear on the comms and never panicked, and he kept track of you the whole dive. The third guy in our usual team was VJ. Yes, I know that sounds hilarious, but that's what we called him, VJ. VJ was older than both of us and had done the job since before saturation diving was a thing. VJ mostly tended in his later years, but he kept his commercial card current and would suit up if we got short. We were on a contract at one of the larger dams that I am not going to name for privacy reasons. The job was a debris clearance on an intake grate at about 90 feet. We'd been on the job for 2 days. It was straightforward work. You feel your way to the rebar of the grate and you find the bigger pieces of debris hung up on it. Usually around here that would be just logs, maybe some fish. Then you wrestle them loose. The current is shut off topside while you work, but you can still feel it pull at you when the sluice gates downstream do their thing. I was on the 3rd dive of the day. I'd been down maybe 12 minutes when Roger came over on comms.
Curtis, you got somebody else down there with you?
I didn't say anything just yet. I'd been getting my arm in behind a log to find where it had caught on the grate, and I had to back out before I could focus on what he had said. Say again, Roger?
Sonar showing 2 returns, you and somebody else. Bigger than a fish.
There's nobody down here, Roger. Just me and the grate.
If you say so, but I'm seeing something bigger than a carp and person-shaped. Hold up, I'll go get VJ.
I stopped moving. Inland diving teaches you to be still very fast if something's going wrong. The current wasn't running, and the water was a black pressure around the outside of my helmet, and that's it. So I waited to hear back from Roger.
Curtis, VJ's at the screen. He says it's a body.
What? I thought. I took a deep breath, then asked, Okay, what do you want me to do?
Just stay where you are. We're trying to figure out if it's a real return or a glitch in the unit.
So I stayed where I was, again. The thing about pitch black water is that all you have are the thoughts in your head. I was at 90 feet of cold water in the dark with no actual stimulus other than the inside of my helmet and Roger's voice. That's when I felt something brush my left wrist. The wrist was outside my glove where the dry suit seal met the glove cuff. And I swear to you now, if you're reading or listening to this, that I felt fingers. I instantly began to yell. Roger, get me up! Get me up right now! A hand just touched my wrist! Roger did not hesitate. I'm grateful that he listened right away without a question.
All right, calm down. You're coming up. We got you. Hold on.
Then it grabbed me, and the hand was strong. This was not the grip, quote-unquote, of a corpse. It was a deliberate grip, with all 5 fingers, and the fingers were colder than the water. The grip held for about 4 seconds, then let go of me, and I felt nothing else, until the lines started to pull me up. They had me on the surface in under a minute. Roger and VJ were both at the rail. Roger was talking on the radio to somebody else. VJ was standing a few steps back from the rail with one hand on the safety bar and looking at me. I rapidly took off my helmet. My arm was shaking. It freaking grabbed me. "Roger, the sonar," VJ called to Roger. Still there. The return's still on the screen." "You said the hand let you go?" "Yeah, it grabbed me and let me go. I stayed sitting down on the dock. I could not feel my legs. VJ stayed at the rail and watched the one screen with Roger. After a minute, VJ spoke up again. "I'm gonna go down." Roger looked at him. "VJ, no, that's not a good idea." "I'll go down. Curtis is shook up, look at him. We can't leave it there, and we can't pull off this contract on day 3. I'll go down." "VJ, suit me up." And so VJ went down. He was on the bottom for about half an hour. Roger talked to him on comms the whole time, and we both watched the screen. The second return, the human-shaped thing, didn't move. VJ's return moved around it, circled it twice, and stopped near it longer than I expected, then came back to the line. VJ came up calmly and slowly. When his helmet came off, he didn't say a word. Instead, he carefully removed his gear. When that was done, he walked over to the cooler and got a Coke and began to drink. "VJ, what did you see?" "Nothing. Can't see a dang thing down there." "You know what I mean. Did you feel anything? What happened?" "Yep, I felt something. I'm done." "You're done?" Roger looked surprised. "Done with the day. Done with the contract for today. Just call the regional supervisor." So Roger did that. The regional came down in his truck and had a long conversation with VJ, but we didn't hear it. Afterwards, the crew packed up and we went home. The next morning, the second return was no longer on the sonar. VJ went down again. He was on the bottom for about 40 minutes and did the clearance himself. He came up, took the suit off, signed the log, and went home. The contract finished out without anything else happening. I worked with VJ for another 5 years. I eventually stopped asking him what he had felt on the bottom of that intake, because he never answered. We kept working jobs together, we ate lunch together when we could. VJ's daughter got married a couple of years later, and he had me at the wedding. He retired in 2017, and we stayed in touch by phone. I tried asking about it again in 2019, when I'd been off the bottle for about 8 months. We were on the phone, and I brought it up. "Hey, you remember that, second return at the dam that one time? You know what I mean. What was that all about? Like, are you ever going to tell me what happened?"
Well, you know what you felt, Curtis?
"Yeah, I remember what I felt. Doubt I'll ever forget it."
Well, the easy way to put it is that it was the same thing. Cold, cold, cold fingers on a hand. Just be thankful that it touched you and you didn't touch it.
"VJ, what does that mean?" He hung up. Dang it, I thought. I was clearly never going to get a real answer from him. And when he died in 2022, the answer would forever escape me, if there even was one. In 2018, I stopped doing inland work. Very thankful that I did. If I ever go swimming in the lake or in the ocean, though, and something skims past my leg, I freak out. But I have a good reason for that. Someone knocked on my truck cab at a rest area. From Petoskey Stone. I drove long haul for decades. It's something I sort of had to get into after a knee injury ended my construction career back in '94. I needed something that didn't beat up my back. I'd been a framing carpenter on commercial builds for 15 years before that, mostly hospitals and schools. The knee was a job site fall. A piece of subfloor gave out under me on a hospital expansion, and I went down 6 feet into rebar. A few surgeries later, the doctor told me I could go back to framing, or I could keep walking when I was 60. I picked what everyone else would probably pick, walking. So I got my CDL. I did short runs for a year, then moved up to long haul. I liked that solo aspect. My wife liked the money and didn't mind the time part. We'd been married for nearly a decade when I switched, and we didn't have kids yet, which made the schedule easier for us. She worked at a credit union in our town and had her routines, and she had her sister around to keep her company. I'd be gone 4 or 5 nights a week and home on weekends. She said it was like having a normal husband with extra weeks of vacation built in. Wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. But maybe it was good, because we stayed together for 33 years, though she passed in 2019, God bless her soul. The driving was good to us. There were a few jobs over the years that stayed with me forever. The one I think about a lot was a stop I made at a rest area, someplace in Michigan, about 12 years back. I was running a load of industrial bearings from Detroit up to a mining operation outside Marquette. It didn't need refrigeration and it wasn't time sensitive, which meant I could take it slow on the haul and not push too hard through the night. Plus, it was a route I was used to. It's a haul that goes up I-75 across the Mackinac Bridge, and then about 3 hours west on US 2 along Lake Michigan. The route has rest areas every 50 miles or so. I usually stopped once on a long haul to sleep 4 hours and eat. I had a favorite stop a little further up, near St. Ignace. They had a hot food vending machine that did decent burritos, and my mouth was watering. But that stop had been closed for renovation that month, so, disappointed, I had to push up on to the next one. That night I pulled into a small rest area between Manistee and Escanaba. One of those places that only has a vending machine, some bathrooms, and some picnic tables. No cameras I could see. No attendants. Places like this folks usually use during the day, and those folks are usually retirees on car trips, and at night they're truckers like me. I think I'd pulled into it 3 or 4 times over the years, but it was rare. It was around 2 a.m. The lot had one other truck in it, an unmarked dry van, dark in color, and parked at the far end. That truck was running its engine on idle, which some guys do when they're sleeping inside and want the cab to be nice and warm. I didn't see any lights on inside, though. I figured the driver was sleeping. I pulled in 2 slots over so I could swing out easy in the morning. I sat in my cab eating a sandwich and a banana, watching the road through the windshield. Suddenly, I heard 3 quiet taps on my driver's side door, about 4 feet up. Quiet enough that I almost didn't hear them over the diesel engine's idling. My door is up high. To tap there, a person would have to be tall or standing on the step. I leaned over to the window and took a look outside. There was a guy on my truck step looking back at me. A white guy in his late 30s, dark hair, and he looked soaked. His shirt and pants were wet through, and his hair was matted to his head. He wasn't wearing a coat, though the temperature outside was in the 40s. His face was clean, no marks and no expression. He looked at me through the glass, and I didn't open the door. I didn't even move. He then took a step back, still looking at me, before walking off across the parking lot toward the trees on the far side. That was about 30 yards of grass between the asphalt and the tree line. He walked it slow, not looking back again. I lost sight of him in the trees. I tried to sleep after that, but couldn't. I kept the doors locked and the engine and headlights off, but I had the cab light on, and I stayed sitting up. Around 4 a.m., the idling engine on the other truck cut off. It was unexpected, and it got that loud quiet. You know, when the only sound around suddenly shuts off, and you're left with that quiet ringing in your ears. It actually made me jump a little. I sat there in silence afterward, and waited for the sun to come up. At dawn, I got out to use the bathroom, and that other truck was gone. Air brakes hiss when a truck pulls out, but I had never heard them hiss. I knew the engine had cut off 4 hours earlier, but I didn't know when the truck had left. Just before I entered the bathroom, I noticed something. On the bathroom door, taped at eye level, was a missing person flyer. The flyer was old, the paper was turning yellow, and the tape on it dried out and curled at the edges. Someone had put it up months ago and had not yet taken it down. I didn't usually care about flyers, but this one was right in my face when I went in. The person on the flyer was a white man in his late 30s with dark hair. He was at a wedding and smiling. There was a name on it. The flyer said he had last been seen at this rest area about 6 months ago. It asked for anyone with information to call a number at the bottom. It was the same guy, the same man who had tapped on my cab. I stood at the bathroom door for a minute looking at the flyer. Then I went in and used the bathroom. I came back out, and the flyer was still there. Of course it was. I looked at it again, just to be sure it was the same guy. No doubt about it. I drove on to Marquette and made my drop. I took my 4 hours and drove back south the same route. The rest area was empty when I went through it. The flyer was still on the bathroom door when I checked again. Honestly, I don't know what I was expecting. I told the guy at the yard who took the truck back from me about it. He simply told me what another driver had told him a year before. It was about the same rest area. Said that a man went to his window and tapped on the door before walking off into the trees. Said the guy reported it, but nothing came of it. I looked into the man's name from the flyer, even went back to get the number. I called the number, and no one would pick up, so I left a voicemail. Having looked up the information, apparently the man was married with 2 daughters, and he was an engineer at one of the iron mines outside Marquette. His car had been found in the rest area the day after he was reported missing. His wallet had been left in the glove box, and his phone on the driver's seat, and by that point no one knew what happened to him. It's just so bizarre, accidentally becoming part of a missing persons case, and to know that he's still alive, still out there, and yet he doesn't want to be found. But what does he want? Why does he go to truckers' windows when they're trying to sleep and tap on the doors? Is he still alive? Was he alive when I saw him at my window? Or was that something else? Phantom in the Container. From Scotty. I was 7 the first time I had something happen that made me a believer. My grandparents lived in an old farmhouse out in the country. I used to stay over there sometimes when my mom picked up extra shifts. They had a spare room upstairs, where my grandma made a little nest of blankets for me on the floor, as the bed had busted springs. One night I woke up to a sound like marbles rolling around. Glass on wood, slow, going one direction then coming back. The attic was right over that spare room, and nobody used it anymore since the ladder had cracked. I lay there with my eyes wide, listening to it roll in what felt like a circle. Then one hard knock on the floorboards right above my head, like somebody had brought their fist down really hard. I bolted out of there and into my grandparents' room. My grandpa got up with his flashlight and his old single shot, walking the hallway in his pajamas. He stood under the attic panel and listened. He came back and told me it was just squirrels. I could tell that wasn't the truth. In the morning, I asked my grandma about it, and even she acted suspicious. But she did say that her mother had heard things in that attic too, back when she was a girl, and that the house had always been a little funny. She said as long as you didn't go looking for it, it didn't bother you. Then she put another pancake on my plate and told me to eat up. I'm in my 40s now and drive a truck for a living. Mostly paper goods, toilet paper, paper towels, and those big industrial rolls. The trailer carries pallets of cases all strapped down. These are pretty light loads and easy hauls. Been doing it for a couple years now. This happened about a year ago. I had a delivery to a warehouse a few hours south. I'd left later than I wanted to since the loading dock was running behind. By the time I was on the highway out in the middle of nowhere, it was getting dark. I was somewhere out in the flatlands when I heard the first thump from the back. Just a single dull sound. Cargo shifts sometimes if it's not strapped in right, or if you hit a bad bump, so I let off the gas a little and kept going. A few minutes after that, it happened again. Only this time it sounded like something tumbled around. Maybe a case or two had come off the top of a pallet and was rolling about. I cussed, since a messy trailer means the warehouse guys give you a hard time on the unload. I dropped my speed down and tried to keep things smooth. But then I heard what I swore sounded like footsteps. It wasn't a thumping sound like cargo, but footsteps, walking slow from the front of the trailer toward the back. A few steps, then a pause, and a few more. The cab is insulated, but you can hear things in the trailer if they're loud enough. And this was loud enough. I told myself it had to be the suspension, or maybe I was tired. I told myself a whole list of things while I began to look for somewhere to pull off the road. The road climbed a low hill, and at the top there was one of those little rural water treatment plants, behind a big chain-link fence. There was nothing else around. The shoulder was wide enough that I could get the rig off the road, so I pulled over there and I killed the engine. I sat in the cab for just a moment, trying to force myself to get out. I then grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket and walked around. The metal was cooling off and I could hear it ticking. I undid the latches and swung one of the doors open, and I stood there, shining my light in. The first thing I saw was that I'd been right about the cargo. There were cases knocked over toward the back, and a bunch of wrapped rolls scattered across the floor. Not as bad as it could have been, but I didn't see an animal or a person and nothing moving around. I let out a breath. I was about to climb up and start fixing some of it when I felt a shift in the air. Something at the very front of the trailer started to move towards me, fast. The only way I knew it was there was because of the disturbances around it. As it moved, the paper goods around it began to ripple like a wave, starting from 60 feet back, rolls blowing outward against the walls and up into the air as it came through. A couple of cases got knocked sideways off the pallets as whatever it was passed. Then it went through me. I felt a forearm hit my chest, definitely a forearm, followed by a hand grabbing my shoulder for half a second and letting go. I got spun a half turn and almost dropped the flashlight. Behind me out on the asphalt, I heard footsteps moving away. 3 or 4 of them, heavy, sounded like boots, going off down the road in the direction I'd just come from. I stood there with my back to the open trailer, my flashlight pointing at the road, and absolutely nothing on the road to point it at. My shoulder was warm where the hand had been. My legs really didn't want to move at that moment. Eventually, I got the door shut. I climbed back into the cab and drove the rest of it too fast for the load I was hauling. My dispatch called once and I let it ring. When I pulled into the lot, the warehouse manager came out and saw the inside of that trailer. And of course, he got on me for 15 minutes about driving like a lunatic and messing up his unload schedule. I let him. There's not much I could have said to not get in trouble at that point. I called my mom that night from a motel and told her about the whole thing. She told me Grandma used to say spirits sometimes hitch rides, that they can get on at one place and get off at another. And when that happens, you just let them off. Don't ask any questions. I asked her if she believed that. She said she didn't know what she believed, but she believed my story. I still run that route sometimes. When I do, I keep the radio up, and anything I hear in the back is no longer my business. The Man with the Head, from Cherry Bulsum. I'll start by saying this isn't really my story. The horror here happened to someone else, someone who didn't make it home that night. But I was there, or near enough to there, and I'm the one who has to live with it, with what I heard and with what I saw, so I guess I get to tell my part. I'm 31. I work the front desk at an office building. I still work there. It's mostly insurance stuff and a couple of small firms that rent space. Think there's a tax office on the second floor, too. The building has maybe 40 employees total when everyone's in, which isn't always. We have a big lot out front and a smaller one in the back for staff. There are trees on one side, a road on the other, and a couple of empty commercial lots nearby. And I can say that this happened in Minnesota in the late 2010s. So my job is the most boring job in the world, answering phones and signing people in. But sometimes I do get to water the plants in the lobby, so that's nice. I bring a book to work most days and get through maybe 100 pages a shift. Some days the only person I talk to is the FedEx guy. Usually I leave at 5, but a few times a month I have to stay late for whatever reason. Some of the partners work late, and they like having someone at the desk in case a client needs to be buzzed in. On those nights, I'm the one who locks up and sets the alarm. Unless the cleaners are coming, then the cleaners do it. But they only come twice a week. On the night in question, they weren't coming. If I recall correctly, it was a Thursday. I'd been there since 7:30 in the morning, as one of the partners had an early thing. I was tired. My back was killing me from sitting all day. I just wanted to go home and put something stupid on TV. The last partner left around 8:45. I did my walk around, made sure the bathrooms were empty and the conference room lights were off, and I came back to my desk, grabbing my bag and my keys. Time to call it a day. I locked up the front, arming the system through the little keypad by the door. Then I walked out toward my car. The back lot has those tall lights on poles, 3 altogether, and they're alright, but they don't really get into the corners. My car was parked about halfway down. I was digging in my bag for my phone, since I always call my husband on the way home. That's when the screaming started. It came from past the edge of the lot, somewhere out in the dark where there's a strip of grass and then the road, then some empty commercial lots. It was coming from a man, I was sure of it. He was screaming like he was being killed, like his guts were being ripped out. The first one was loud and went on way too long. Then it broke into a second that was much higher pitched. But then he started to make another noise, a wet noise, like he was trying to scream through something filling up his throat. I gotta be honest, I didn't move. I stood there in the parking lot with my hand still in my bag, and I didn't move for what felt like a long time, but was maybe just 4 or 5 seconds. I'm not sure my brain was even working, but I kept hearing the man scream. I made a run for my car. I got to the driver's side and hit the unlock button on my fob, and nothing happened. I hit it again 3 times, 4 times. Nothing. I pulled at the handle anyway, but it didn't budge. That fob worked when I came to work that morning. It worked at lunch when I went and got a salad from the place down the road. It just sat there in my hand like it was now dead. And that is what it turned out to be. The screaming stopped while I was standing at my car door. It cut off with a last wet sound, then went completely quiet. In a panic, I started to head back toward the building. I wasn't running just yet. I think I was kind of half walking, half stumbling, because my legs felt weak. But that's when I heard someone talking. A man's voice as well, quiet, kind of sing-song, coming from out there past the lot. I couldn't make out the words, or they were words I couldn't understand anyway. It sounded like he was saying the same thing over and over. I turned to look, involuntarily. My body just did it on its own. I shouldn't have looked. I wish I didn't. There's a low concrete divider at the edge of our lot, and past that, there's some grass and then the road. He was just on the other side of the road, standing there in the dark between 2 of the streetlights, where it's hard to see. But I could see his shape, and I could see he had something in each hand. One of those somethings was a knife, a big knife. I could see it glinting in the light when it moved. The other thing he was holding by hair. It took me a moment to realize what I was looking at. My brain kept trying to make it be something else, a bag or a mask, something somebody would actually carry normally. But it wasn't those things. He was holding another man's decapitated head. I couldn't make a sound. Even though my body wanted me to scream, I couldn't do it. It was like my throat closed up, and nothing would come out. I ran for the front door of the building, not the back. I went all the way around, since the front door is the one I had the keys for. I got the key in on maybe the 3rd try. My hands were trembling fiercely, and I had trouble punching in the alarm code. The keypad beeped at me twice for wrong entries before I finally got it. I shut the door behind me, locked it, and slid down the wall, dialing 911 from the floor. The dispatcher was very calm with me, but I was not calm. I was telling her there was a man with a head outside. A head. And she kept telling me to slow down, to tell her where I was. The cops got there fast. I could see the lights through the front windows. They found him. Pretty quickly, too. Although I couldn't tell much more than that night. And I wasn't told much. What I would learn later, mostly from the news, was that the victim was a man in his 50s who worked at one of the other businesses on that road. He had been walking to his car like I was that night. The man who did it wasn't even from here. They said in the news there was a religious component to it, that he believed he was supposed to do what he did, that he'd come into this country with that intention or had developed it after getting here. That part they weren't sure of. They didn't really explain more than that. I don't think anyone could really explain. I quit for about 6 weeks, but then I came back since I needed the money, and the partners were good to me about it. I only work days now. They got a security guy who comes in at 5 and stays until close, which they should have done all along. The back lot has more lights now, too, and I got my key fob's battery replaced. Works without a hitch now. Still, I think about that night, how I was maybe 50 yards away from a man who had been decapitated by another man, and that could have been me. I thought it was a person. From Schmert, 49. I'm 34 years old. I live in Sweden in a smallish town not too far from Göteborg. My job is to work at a warehouse on the edge of town for a clothing distributor. For a long time, I didn't have a car. Cars cost a lot here, and gas costs a lot too, and insurance costs a lot. I lived close enough to the warehouse that walking made more sense for me. About a 40-minute walk if I wasn't distracted. 50 on a bad day. My shift started in the afternoon and ended late, sometimes 11 at night, sometimes later if we had a big order going out the door. So I'd walk in during daylight and walk home in the dark. I'd been doing these walks for maybe a year and a half. The walk goes through town for a bit, then there's a section, about 15 minutes of it, where the road cuts through woods. Real forest, so dense with underbrush you can't walk through it, unless you're crazy. The road is paved but narrow, and there are no streetlights along that stretch. During the day, it's one of the most scenic walks you could ask for. You can hear birds and smell the pine. Sometimes you see a hare cross in front of you. I used to look forward to that part on the way in. Walking home at night, I didn't really think about it. I would have headphones in, and I had my thoughts with me, so the dark didn't scare me and I really didn't notice it. Until this happened. This occurred in autumn. It was cold, and the leaves were changing. There was a storm that evening, a pretty bad one, with rain coming sideways and wind that made you nervous about the roof. It started about an hour before my shift ended, and was still going pretty bad when we were done. A few of us stayed in the break room and waited it out. I had a coffee with an older guy named Mikhail, and for some time we talked about football. Sometime after midnight, the rain finally let up. Mikhail's wife came to pick him up, and I told one of the other guys I was just gonna walk it. He looked at me funny, but didn't say anything else. Really, I should have asked for a ride, but I didn't. Outside, the air was heavy and wet, and the road was shining. There was mist coming up off the ground in patches, and you could see it move through the lot lights. I put my hood up, and I started to walk, same as I always did. The town part of the walk was great. A few cars went past, streetlights were on, everything looked clean and washed. I felt pretty good, actually. I like that crisp look and feel after a storm has just gone, and everything is quiet again. Eventually I got to the woods, and I noticed right away how much darker they were than a usual night. Cloud cover was still thick, and the moon was only getting through in little bits. The mist was heavier in there too, sitting low between the trees, drifting across the road. I could only see about 20 meters in front of me when the moonlight hit right, and that wasn't very often. I'd been on that stretch for maybe a couple of minutes when I noticed there was someone walking ahead of me. The road bent a little, and when the moon caught the bend, I saw the figure walking. They were tall. I'm 180 centimeters, around 65 kilos, on the thinner side. This person was taller than me, quite a bit, maybe 2 meters and thinner, which was a surprise to see someone that tall yet thinner than me. The shoulders were narrow, and the arms looked long. I could only see them from behind. I assumed they were wearing dark clothes, or maybe just dark from the wet. I couldn't really tell. My assumption was it was someone from town walking home just like me. Maybe someone had been at the bar a little too long, or finishing a late shift. Their pace was steady and calm, not in a hurry, so I kept my pace as well. I didn't want to catch up to them since it's awkward to walk right behind a stranger in the dark, but I didn't want to slow down either. It was cold, and I was ready to get home. For a while, it was just the two of us, me and the person ahead, walking through that wooded stretch with the mist around us. I'd say it went on for another 15 minutes, give or take, which usually would have been the end of the stretch by now, but we were taking a much slower, careful pace. I remember thinking it was a little strange that this person ahead of me never looked back. People usually do look back or look around, especially when they hear someone behind them, even just a quick glance. This person did not. They just walked. Eventually, I started to feel uncomfortable, though I really couldn't say why. Their walk didn't seem right. I told myself I was just being paranoid, so I turned up my music and ignored it. The woods began to thin out. I could see the lights of town up ahead, the first streetlight after the bend, and the edges of buildings. We were almost out of the trees, and I felt relieved. I was thinking about getting home, getting out of my wet clothes, and what I was going to eat. The figure was still about 15 meters ahead of me. As we came into the dappled light at the edge of the woods, where the streetlight from town was just starting to reach, they finally turned. Their upper body twisted, the shoulders came around, and the head came around with it. They looked at me over their shoulder while still walking forward. I lost my breath in that very moment. I made some kind of sound, but it wasn't a scream, even though I wanted to. That wasn't a human face I was looking at, not a human head. What I saw was a long snout like an animal's, and the mouth was open a little, and I could see teeth inside it. The eyes were set back along the snout, and they caught the streetlight. They went bright for a moment, like a dog's eyes reflecting light. It looked at me for just a couple of seconds. Its head was still turning forward again, and the body was still walking forward, and the legs had not broken their stride. Eventually, it turned its head back the rest of the way and veered right off the road and into the trees, into that underbrush I said people wouldn't normally walk into because it's too thick. It did so effortlessly, in a calm, two-legged walk. The mist and darkness in the trees quickly swallowed it up, and I couldn't see it anymore. I stopped then, just stopped right there in the road. I was breathing really hard. I couldn't make my legs move anymore, and my hands felt numb. In my head, I was just arguing with myself about what I just saw. Was it real? Was it a person in a costume? Or did I just spot the most insane-looking animal of all time? At the same time, I was still trying to figure out if it was still in those trees right next to me, watching. The thought of it just off the road, only a few meters in the woods, looking back at me through the trunks. That was what finally got me moving. I ran, and I have not run like that since I was a kid. I sprinted past the spot where it had gone into the trees as fast as I could, eyes forward, panting like a madman. I kept on running until I was well into the town part of the road, lights all around me and even a few people. The remainder of the walk or run home I don't even remember. The next thing I knew, I was at my apartment, walking inside, more grateful than ever to be back home. I only ever told one person about this experience, specifically my brother, because I was trying to explain to him why I suddenly wanted a car. He's the practical type, and he thought it was a good idea anyway, monster on the wooded road or not. I had enough put away in a couple of months to buy something old and small, and that's what I drive even now. I have no idea what that was. My brother showed me pictures of bears standing up, mooses even, strange cryptid photos he found on Google, but none of that matched. A bear doesn't walk like that, and it isn't that thin, and a moose does not have that shape, let alone that face. Thank God I don't walk home anymore. True stories of a geriatric nurse in Germany. From Stefan, Germany, 1903. First of all, I wanted to say that I love the way you tell all those stories. I stumbled over them during a night shift on YouTube, and they're a part of my night shifts ever since. I'm a male geriatric nurse working in a nursing home for elderly people in Germany, and at this time I'm 29 years old. I've never been a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural or unexplainable, and I wouldn't say that I get spooked easily. Maybe because I've already witnessed bad things from a very young age, since I started working in nursing homes when I was 14. I've experienced various, mystical or unexplainable things during my time at work, and I thought, why don't I just share them with you? Because in my job I work with very personal and intimate data, I won't share any names of my elderlies, but I'll try to keep as many details in these stories as I legally can. Number 1. The first time I witnessed something suspicious or nearly supernatural was when I was 18 and just started getting serious in my job by freshly entering a professional internship to become a geriatric nurse. My colleagues and I were sitting in the office room of the elderly home, doing our break. Right at the opposite side of the office was a room, empty at the time, because the man who was living in there had died only a few days ago. He had been a nice man, caring for some of the other people living with us, like helping them to cut their meals in comfortable bits, or filling up their glasses with water or tea or other beverages. I was eating my sandwich that I prepared for that day, when all of a sudden, exactly that room started to ring. When we say a room where a patient is ringing, we mean that they pressed the call button in their room to call for us. This causes a little red lamp over their door to light up, and a soft bell starts to ring to alarm us that the person needs something. That empty room ringed. I gave a look to my colleagues and we waited. Two of them started to smile and grin, obviously amused because of my sweet, unknowing reaction. Or probably just because I stopped chewing and watched the door of that room with suspicion all over my face. Until one of them leaned closer to me, encouraging me. "Come on, give it a look. I promise you, there's nobody in there. He is just saying goodbye." I looked at her in disbelief, but I stood up. I went over to that room and I opened the door. She was right. There was nobody inside. Just the call button over the empty bed lighting up. My colleague came after me, understanding and soft, saying, "Look, you gotta learn. Sometimes people don't leave even after they've died. Sometimes they stay for a bit until they really leave, whether their body's still here or not. Congratulations, you just learned the reason why we open the window and light a candle whenever someone of our elderly dies." And she's right. By now I've worked in 2 hospitals and 4 elderly homes/nursing homes. All of them honor that tradition. Wherever you witness that someone, a patient or an elderly person, died, you open a window, no matter the weather outside, and you light a candle. The candle is meant to light the soul, spirit, ghost, or whatever you want to call it, of the deceased to show them the way to their beyond. And you open the window so nothing gets trapped inside. Number 2. Over the years, I've learned that I don't need to fear the dead. I've had many other encounters like that. Sometimes I would hear just like a whisper, a patient that died, like them calling my name, or the sounds of their walking. I even heard one of their wheelchairs one time, even though the owner of that wheelchair had just died. No matter what, they never hurt me. It's humans I'm afraid of, the living ones, and I've got my reasons. A few years ago, when I was 23, I worked the night shift. To close in on some important information, at that time I worked in a very small nursing home, which had up to 43 elderly people, and I might be the sole worker there, from 9 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. Yeah, just me for 43 people. It was like my usual night shifts, though. I did my first 2 rounds, made sure that everybody got everything they needed, and was safe and sleeping soundly. I arranged the medication for the next day. Then I would have a bit of free time. Of course, I couldn't go on a full break, but everything was quiet. And on one such night, I sat back into my office chair during free time and spent some time on my phone. Around 2:30 a.m., something happened. One of my elderly, a man with autism and a brain developing error, which kept him on a cognitive level of a 10 to 12-year-old boy, called. He was a sweetheart, and he never usually called in the night. It wasn't part of his routine. So naturally, I got up right away and made my way to his room on the ground level. I entered his room slowly, so I wouldn't scare him if he just pressed the call button while being asleep. But he looked at me. He was awake. Well, more or less. His eyes were small and tired and half asleep and half awake. So I went up next to his bed and asked him softly and calmly, "Hey, is everything all right?" He looked at me. I saw in his eyes and his face that he was bothered by having his routine ruined that night. But he stayed calm and sweet. But then he said something that made my blood freeze in my very veins. "Stefan, there are men in front of my window." I tensed up a bit, but I kept my professional face soft, warm, and understanding. He was afraid, basically an afraid child in the body of an old man. So I took his hand in mine and told him, "It's okay. I bet you just had a nightmare. You can go back to sleep now. I'm here. I'm not going to let anything happen to you." It worked. As soon as I finished talking, he closed his eyes and went back to sleep immediately. But there was this feeling. Why did he see that in his dream? I stood up. I turned toward the window to draw the curtains shut. And I froze. He was right. It wasn't a dream. When I turned, I faced 3 men wearing black hoodies. I could not see their faces, but they looked big and bad. I turned and sprinted. I knew his window was shut, so they couldn't get into the room. He was safe, But I was alone, guarding 43 elderly people all by myself, with 3 unknown men in front of the building, possibly looking for a way inside. I ran as fast as I could. I went into every room, checking every window. After I was certain that there was no way in, I started panicking. Not loud, but I was very afraid. Because these men didn't leave after I saw them. They stayed. I did the only thing I could think to do at the time. I grabbed my phone and called the neighbor of the nursing home. Luckily for me, he picked up and did what I asked. He opened his back door, loudly, turning on the lights to his house, and slammed it shut again. It worked. The men took off down the street and out of view. I was so relieved. But why didn't I just call the police? Well, I'll tell you this. The next station was about half an hour away. Too far for them to arrive in time. These men would have managed to come inside and do God knows what by then. A few days went by, and when I returned for work, I learned something that gave me the chills all over again. The same night, about 1 hour later than my encounter, someone broke into the nursing home 2 towns over. They cut through the glass of the staircase and entered the building that way. They didn't hurt anyone, luckily, but they went in, stealing the medicine from the elderly, primarily numbing and pain-killing meds. Those are just 2 of many stories and encounters I've had over the years. If you've got any interest for other stories from me, I'd be happy to share them with you. Take care, everyone. The Cleaner's Shift in the Old Wing, from Ziggy Stardust. I'm 36, from Wales. I work nights as a cleaner in a big old hospital. You know the type, one of those massive Victorian buildings that's been extended over the years with newer bits bolted on. My job is to go through the quieter wards and corridors after visiting hours, mopping floors, emptying bins, and making sure everything's tidy for the day staff. Most nights it's just me and a couple of other cleaners, plus the skeleton night staff. After midnight, the place goes properly dead. The lights are dimmed, the heating clanks, and you can hear your own footsteps echoing down the long corridors. It was a bitter cold night in February. Rain lashed against the windows like it was trying to get in. Around 2:30 a.m., I was finishing up in the old East Wing, the part of the hospital they barely used anymore except for storage, and the occasional overflow ward. The lights in that section are always a bit flickery, and it smells damp. Nothing you spray on it ever quite covers whatever's underneath. I needed a break, so I headed for the small staff room tucked away at the far end of the corridor. It's a grim little place with peeling paint and plastic chairs that have seen better days. When I pushed open the door, the lights were already on, which was strange. We're supposed to turn them off to save power. There was an odd smell, too. Not that usual hospital stink, but something sickly sweet. I flicked on the kettle and sat down. That's when I heard scratching, like fingernails dragging across something. I leaned down to look. Nothing. Just shadows and a few old sweet wrappers. The rain was hammering hard outside. Then my walkie-talkie crackled. But no voice, just low static with something underneath. Sort of a gurgling. The lights dimmed suddenly, buzzing like they were about to die. It was then that I saw him, sitting in the far corner, half hidden by the coat rack. An older man in his late 50s, wearing the same dark green cleaner's uniform as me. But it looked worn and much more outdated. His skin was pale and waxy, and he was hunched over, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. "Hey, you all right?" I said, trying to sound casual. "I didn't see you come in." He didn't move or even blink. The rotting flower smell was getting stronger, filling the room. I stood up slowly. "You new on nights? I haven't seen you around before." Still nothing, until eventually, with a raspy voice, he whispered, "You finished your round yet?" No. I've still got the west corridor to do. You okay there? You don't sound too good." He slowly raised his head. His eyes, I swear to you, were solid black. Like 2 holes had been drilled into his skull. They didn't even reflect the lights. "Best you clock out now, before it realizes you're still walking these halls." My stomach tried to crawl up my own throat. "What do you mean, it?" A slow, broken smile spread across his face, revealing 2 long teeth that were more than yellow. The one that does the final sweep after the living are supposed to be gone. Don't stay too long. Suddenly, the walkie-talkie exploded with noise. At the same time, the temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my own breath. I backed to the door, never taking my eyes off of him. As I reached for the handle, the last thing he said to me was, "It's already counted you once tonight." I slammed the door shut and ran down the corridor. The main lights in the east wing suddenly flared back to full brightness. The other cleaners said I looked as if I'd seen a ghost when I found them. I told them in basically a whimper what I saw. One older lad went pale and said there used to be a cleaner here in the 90s who died in the exact same staff room. He'd apparently been found slumped in the chair with his eyes wide open. They say it was a heart attack, but rumors always swirled that he'd seen something he shouldn't have while working the old wing by himself. I forced myself to finish the shift, but I have not stepped foot in that back staff room since. There's only one good way to walk home alone at night, and that's by becoming a premium member at Erie.fm right now. You can keep yourself company with my members-only podcast, Fractured Reality, where I narrate allegedly true accounts of glitches in reality, or explore new worlds like the one in Dogwood, a horror novel audiobook I narrated myself about monsters attacking a small town in Georgia in the 1940s. Free users can get samples, but premium users get the full experience. That's Erie.fm. Membership does not guarantee protection from hungry monsters or terrifying coworkers. Good night. That's all for now, everyone. I've got to clock out, but I'll be back again real soon. By the way, if you do have any ideas of some members-only or spin-off podcasts based off of Tales from the Break Room, I'm all ears. Tweet me on Twitter @DarkPrevails, or send me an email at brendan@eriecast.com. I'd love to hear your ideas. Thank you. I wrote and narrated a brand new, fully produced creepypasta called The Trade on my members-only podcast, Delete After Reading, over at Erie.fm. When a man discovers a tooth on his pillow, he remembers a deal he made with a disturbing voice under a house, and payment has become due. Listen now. Go to Erie.fm and become a premium member to support me and save me from YouTube. Listen to The Trade on Delete After Reading, and much more. That's Erie.fm. Thank you. Eater. A single word. No username to attribute. This story was emailed to me anonymously. It was titled only that. Eater. And when I read it, I realized the name fit the story perfectly. This allegedly true tale will send a chill down your spine and force you to rethink all the unspoken rules of the forest as you know them. Because something out there is very, very hungry, and you wouldn't want to make it angry. My family lives in the southern part of Missouri on 22 acres. There are 3 houses on that property. My grandparents' house, which sits at the front by the gravel road. My parents' house, which is about a 5-minute walk back into the trees on a packed dirt path, which my dad maintains with a tractor. Then there's my uncle's house, another 5 minutes past mine on the same path, in a clearing my grandfather cut for him before I was born. Most of the rest of the acreage is woods, oak and hickory mostly, I think, and the back half of the property hits state forest. So once you go past my uncle's house, you're in trees for as far as you want to walk. I started going on these hikes back there alone the summer before high school. I wasn't really hiking, technically, since the trails were trails my dad and uncle had cut for hunting, and our family had been walking them for 40 years, but it sort of felt like hiking whenever I went. I would put a water bottle and a notebook in my backpack, and walk out there for an hour or two with no particular plan. I'd wanted to be a writer since 5th grade, when I read Mistborn for the first time, and by freshman year I'd started a fantasy novel that I was sure was going to be the next Stormlight Archive. It was bad. I know it was bad now that I look back on it, but even then I probably subconsciously knew it was bad. I was working on some magic system where mages drew power from the minerals in their own bones, and the more powerful the mage, the more bone mineral they had to grow. I'd spent most of the summer outlining this trilogy that I wanted to do. I had 3 books planned with a 4th that was going to surprise everybody. I even had a map I drew with colored pencils and labeled with names I was sure sounded foreign and significant. I had 3 pages of glossary at the back of my notebook. My main character was a girl named Sarah who could draw iron out of her own marrow, and her older brother Rin had been killed before the book started, but kept showing up in flashbacks where he taught her how to steal. The flashbacks were the part I was most proud of, since they let me write whole chapters where the main character wasn't doing anything action-related, and I'd figured out at some point that the parts I actually liked writing were not the action parts. But anyway, I'm ranting here. So whenever I hit a snag in my book or outlines, the woods were where I went to think about that kind of thing. On a weekend afternoon, I found a new spot. The leaves had just started to turn, and it was warm enough that I could go out in just a t-shirt. I brought a hoodie just in case, but I ditched it by the time I got past my uncle's house. I'd been stuck for a week on this scene where Sarah was supposed to figure out a clue about Rin that didn't add up, and I thought that if I went somewhere that I'd never set before, the scene would unstick. I would get new ideas. That's how I thought writer's block worked at 14. I walked past the spot I usually went to, which itself was a flat rock about 30 minutes from my house, overlooking a dry creek bed. I kept on going from there. I followed a deer trail off the main path that I'd noticed before but had never taken, and I went maybe another 20 minutes back, climbing carefully up a ridge, until I got to a place where 2 oak trees had grown close together, their roots making a kind of seat between them. That seat faced out across a hollow. The hillside on the other side of the hollow was covered in trees, but not as densely as the one I was on, so you could see between the trunks farther down the slope. I sat with my back to one of the oaks and pulled out my notebook. I wrote for a while. I'd brought a warm Pepsi I'd stolen from my dad's mini fridge in the garage, and I drank it slowly, working on the clue scene. I gave up on the clue scene and started a flashback that I'd been wanting to write, where Rin was teaching Sarah how to read other people's faces. I had a whole speech he was going to give about how you could spot a person who was about to lie, since their eyebrows start to pull together a little before their mouth begins to move. I was very proud of the speech, not at all sure how to make it sound like a real teenage girl listening to her older brother, and not some teenagers writing. At some point I hit that mental wall again. I sat with my pen in my hand looking at what I'd written. I didn't like any of it. I closed the notebook and put it in my lap. I looked up across the hollow. On the opposite hillside, more or less directly across from where I was sitting, there was a cave opening. I hadn't seen it before. The angle of the slope had been hiding it from me on the walk up. It was about halfway up the hill, tall and narrow, about 7 feet high and 3 feet across. The inside was very dark. But there was a man standing at the mouth of that cave. He was tall, taller than my dad, and extremely thin. His skin seemed pale enough that I could see him clearly, with that darkness of the cave behind him. I couldn't tell from that distance if he was wearing clothes, and I'm still not totally sure. He had a face. He wasn't some faceless thing. I just couldn't see what his face looked like from that distance. But I could tell he was looking at me. I knew he was. His head was angled toward me, and not anywhere else. He raised his right hand. He turned it once at the wrist, a small, friendly-looking wave, like a neighbor across the road, but this was out in the middle of the woods. I was so confused, and honestly a bit creeped out, that I didn't wave back. It never even crossed my mind. I sat still with my notebook on my lap, pen in hand, wondering who he was. I watched him and waited, and I could tell he was waiting for me to do something. He stood there with his hand still up, for what felt like forever, but then he eventually lowered his hand. Then he turned and walked into the cave. The darkness inside that cave swallowed him whole. He didn't bend down to fit through the opening, even though the opening looked shorter than he was. He walked straight back in and was gone. I sat there for I don't know how long. I felt like I was waiting to see if he'd come back out. But I think I was actually waiting to see if my heart would ever slow down. He didn't come back out. After a while, I started to feel like I was being looked at by something I couldn't see. So I picked up my notebook, and I stood up, and I began to walk back along the trail I'd come up. I took the long route back. I walked down to the dry creek, and I followed it for about 10 minutes before I caught up to my dad's path. The long route went through more open trees, and I was able to see farther in every direction, making me feel safer. During my walk, I was coming up with explanations. Maybe I'd run into some tall hunter in pale clothes who was standing at a rock formation that looked like a cave at that distance. Maybe my eyes had been tired from riding for so long. Neither one felt true while I was telling it to myself. I knew I'd seen something. I just wanted to have seen something else. When I got home, my mom was on the phone in the kitchen, and my dad was watching a college football game in the living room. Never knew how he watched that stuff. Neither of them looked up when I came through the back door. I went to my room with a notebook, and I sat on my bed, writing down what I'd seen in the back of the notebook, in the section I used for ideas that I didn't want to forget. I wrote it in detail. I wanted to be able to read it later, and not to mix up or exaggerate anything while it was fresh on my mind. I thought about telling my parents about it. I knew exactly what would happen if I did, though. Right away, my mother would blame fantasy books, me reading them before bed, and my dad would say something about Mr. Velman down the road, sometimes hunting on our property, how he was going to talk to him about staying off of it. But that wasn't Mr. Velman. I wanted someone to take my story seriously if I was going to tell it. The only person I could think of was my cousin Daryl. Daryl lived in my uncle's house, his father's, and was 3 years older than me. We had a family bonfire coming up at the end of the week, and I decided I would try to tell him then. The bonfire came around a few nights later. We had bonfires most weekends in the fall. We had them in the clearing behind my parents' house, where my dad built a fire pit when I was little. My grandparents would walk down with their lawn chairs. My uncle and Daryl would come up from their house. Mom would put together hot dogs and chili. It was the kind of family thing I grew up with, and I always assumed every family did stuff like that, till I started high school and realized most of my friends only saw their cousins on holidays. I waited until everybody was settled with food, and most of the adults had a beer in their hand. Daryl had wandered to the edge of the firelight, where he liked to throw sticks into the dark whenever he got bored. I went over to him. "Hey, what's good? You done with that hot dog? Or are you just gonna let it die in your hand?" "I'm eating it, man." "Looks like you're just holding it to me." "Hey, sit down." He took my plate and stuck it on the log next to him. He pulled an extra Coke out of the cooler at his feet and pushed it toward me. Your mom really outdid herself with this chili." My grandma made that chili this time. Mom did the hot dog stuff and the dessert. See, that's a good system we got going there. 2 of them each doing their thing. You know, Mom won't even come over here when Grandma's cooking. She gets weird about it, like she thinks it's a competition. He cracked his Coke open. "What's up with you? You're being quiet over there. Got a weird look on your face." "Well, I was just wanting to tell you something. You want to hear it?" "Okay." "You can't laugh." "Now I'm definitely gonna laugh. You realize that, right? Dude, that's the worst opener you can possibly have. You just guarantee to laugh whether what you tell me is funny or not. And frankly, I find that offensive. You trying to control my emotions." "I'm serious, Daryl. I'm being completely serious right now. If you laugh, I'm walking back to the house, and you can have the rest of my Coke." "Okay, geez, dang, I'm done. I'm not laughing." "So what's the deal? Is it about a girl? Tell me this is about a girl. She cute? She chubby?" "Daryl, it's not about a girl." "All right, then." "So last weekend I went up the ridge, past the dry creek. Like, real far past it. And I mean way past where Papa shot that buck 2 years ago, the big one. I found a new spot there that I'd never been to. There's these 2 oaks growing close together, and there's a place to sit between their roots. I was up there for a while, doing my writing." "All right, so far so good, I'm with you." "And on the other side of the hollow, there's apparently a cave." "Come on now, there's no cave up there. I've been all over that ridge, there's no cave up there." "I know there is, I'm telling you. There's a cave on the opposite hillside, about halfway up the slope. And while I was sitting in my new spot, there was somebody standing in front of it." The stick he was holding stopped mid-turn. He looked up at me from under the brim of his hat. "Wait, standing in front of what?" "In front of the cave. Like an actual person standing there?" "Yeah, a tall, thin, pale person, standing in front of the cave, which I'd never seen before. on the other side of a hollow I'd been hiking past since I was a kid. He was just standing there at the mouth of it, like he had stepped out of it to just check the weather. Alright then, that's just a hunter. That's gotta be a hunter, dude. Somebody Mr. Velman or one of those guys let on the property and didn't tell us about. Bastards. I thought it was a hunter too for about 3 seconds. What do you mean? Was he wearing orange or camouflage or anything? Velman always wears orange when he's out there. No, his clothes were pale. But this guy, he waved at me. He did that sideways look without turning his head. The look he used in middle school when he wanted me to know he knew I was being weird. He set the stick down across his knees. He waved at you? The pale guy at the cave waved at you across a hollow. Yeah, it was a normal-looking wave. Like real neighborly, you know? Alright then, so a weird guy you don't know at some cave you've never seen before decides he's gonna wave at you from across the way. Is that right? Right. And what'd you do? I didn't wave back. Man, are you serious? You didn't wave back? You don't not wave back at a hunter, dude. That's the worst possible thing you can do. That's like a personal insult. Those guys take that real personal, too. They go out hunting all day and the only person they see in the woods doesn't even wave back at them. That's gonna stick in their head for a week. Daryl, he wasn't a hunter. How do you know that? There's no way you can tell from across a hollow if a guy is or isn't a hunter. You literally just told me you thought he was a hunter for 3 seconds. That's because when I didn't wave back, he turned around and walked back into the cave. The opening of the cave was shorter than he was, but he didn't bend down to fit, if that makes sense. He didn't have to duck down, he just walked in straight up. And I'm not sure how that's possible. He turned the stick a few more times. He was looking at me instead of the fire now. Are you screwing with me right now? Like, for real? I'm not. I'm being 100% with you. Man, I know I tease you about your fantasy book stuff, but if you're messing with me right now, you gotta tell me. Since I'm starting to actually believe you, and I don't want to be the dumb cousin who believed you. Don't make me regret it. I'm not messing around. I wouldn't be making this up. I'm not gonna make something up to mess with my own cousin at his own family's bonfire about a cave. I mean, heck, I don't want to be telling you this right now, because nobody wants to see something weird in the woods. Depends on your definition of weird. He nodded, and went quiet for a second. The fire popped then, startling me. It threw a small shower of orange sparks. Mom was telling my grandma something on the other side of the fire about a casserole she'd brought over earlier in the week. Well, I do believe you, but I don't know what to do with that fact, but I do believe you. Well, good, and thanks, I guess. He shrugged. These hills, man, I don't know how to explain it to you. I felt watched out here ever since I was a little kid. Anytime I go too far past the clearing, I feel it, even in the daytime, even when I know there are people not that far behind me. There's this feeling that hits when I get past where Papa's old fence used to be. I figured everybody felt it, and that was just what hiking the back of the property was. And I never said nothing about it to my dad. He'd think I was being a big baby. So, you think there's something off about this place? Based on what I felt, yeah, and I felt it for years. I mean, I felt something on the walk home from the ridge that day. Not before I saw the guy, but definitely after. The whole hike back, I had that feeling on me. You think it's the same thing? Couldn't tell you, man. Not sure. I think the feeling came from seeing him. You see something creepy, you go home, and you feel creeped out, like watching a scary movie at the theater. So, if you ask me personally, I think it was just a reaction to seeing something weird. Mm-hmm. You don't agree? Well, I think you saying the feeling doesn't mean anything is what people say when they don't want it to mean something. You said it yourself, you felt something after, but you didn't feel it before. But yeah, that's the point. It is the point. That's what I'm saying, man. He crossed his arms and nodded, like he had won a debate. The next 2 weeks were pretty normal. School was school. I worked on my book when I could, and I stopped going past my uncle's house when I went out walking. I'd been sleeping kind of bad since the Ridge incident, with weird short dreams I couldn't remember, and a heavy feeling in my head all day that just wouldn't go away, even if I drank coffee. I figured I was getting sick. The night I'm about to write about happened later that month. I went to bed around 10, and I woke up at what my phone said was after 2 a.m. I thought I'd heard something. I lay there for maybe 30 seconds without moving, but then I heard it again. this wet, slurping sound with a ripping underneath it. It was coming from the front yard. My bedroom is at the front of the house. My window faces the front yard and the gravel drive that runs along the side of the house. It turns into the dirt path back to my uncle's place. Our front yard isn't lit at night, except for whatever spillover comes off the porch light. But the street light at the end of our driveway by the gravel road does throw a little extra light onto the grass closer to the road. I got out of bed and I went to my window, pulling the curtain back about 3 inches and looking out. There was something in the yard, about 20 feet from my window. It was in the patch of grass between the porch and the gravel drive, at the edge of the porch's light's reach. It was crouched on its haunches with its head down over something on the ground. It was pale and thin. Its head moved in fast, jerky pulses while it ate. I couldn't see what it was eating, and the thing itself was hard to make out. The screen on my window had that fine mesh that makes everything beyond it real grainy looking, and the porch light wasn't lighting that spot well. I stood there with the curtain in my hand. I'm not going to pretend I had a brave reaction to it. I let go of the curtain and let it fall, and I went back to bed. I pulled my comforter up over my head, and I lay there listening to my own breathing, trying to convince myself the thing in the yard was a coyote, and that if I went and looked again, I would see a coyote and feel stupid. But I did not go and look again. I woke up the next morning to my mom yelling. She wasn't yelling at me. She was outside, and her yelling voice was traveling up to my window. I heard my dad's voice too, lower, and another voice that sounded like my uncle. I got out of bed and went to my window again, and without thinking I pulled the curtain back. There they were, standing in the yard, all 3 of them, in the same spot that thing had been the night before. My uncle was holding something, and he seemed real mad. I put my pants on and a hoodie and went down. My mom looked over at me when I came out the front door and started to say something that began with, "Honey," and stopped. My dad shook his head at me without saying a word. My uncle wouldn't look at me at all. He was holding something familiar in his hand. A dog collar. Specifically, the collar that belonged to his chihuahua, Sisyphus. Sisyphus was a rowdy, barking chihuahua, and my uncle would let that thing out to do whatever at any time of the day or night. I was confused as to why he was holding Sisyphus's collar, but then I saw what he had in his other hand, and my stomach turned. It was the back half of Sisyphus's head. The body was gone. When I looked down, there was a stain on the grass where the body probably had been, and some other stuff that I'm not going to list. The head and the collar were the only pieces accounted for. My uncle had this expression that probably meant, if I find whoever did this, they're not going to have a face any longer. He kept going on about the freaking coyotes. He said it 3 or 4 times in a row, looking at the ground. He looked up at the trees after on the other side of the gravel drive, like he was about to walk right in there and tear them apart with his bare hands. I saw something out here last night. My mom looked at me. I could tell she had been about to say something else and stopped. My uncle was desperate for information, and he stepped forward. What was it? Around 2 in the morning I woke up, and I heard something outside, so I went to the window and looked out. There was something right here at this exact spot. I pointed to the patch of grass my uncle was standing on. Honey, why didn't you wake us up? My mom asked. It was through the screen and it was dark out. I thought it was a coyote, but I couldn't see very good, so I went back to bed. So it was a coyote? I don't know what I saw. I told myself it was a coyote. Whatever it was kneeling down and chewing on something. It looked pale and skinny. Its head was moving fast. So you don't know? You couldn't see good? No, I couldn't, Uncle Doug. I'm sorry. The screen on my window has that mesh on it, and the porch light isn't very good out here. But I'm telling you I saw something. You saw a coyote eating my dog and went back to bed. I didn't know it was eating Sisyphus. I didn't know there was a dog out here. I thought it was a wild thing eating a wild thing. I'm sorry, I don't know what else to say. My uncle cursed at me then, and my dad put a hand on his shoulder to calm him down. Then my uncle shook the hand off and walked across the gravel drive. More like stormed off. He went into the trees. "Head back inside, honey. I think you've seen enough," Mom told me, and I went in. I could hear my mom say behind me to my dad, "Why did you let him come over here? Do you think he needed to see that?" And my dad followed up with, "Dear, he's 14. He can handle it." And by then I was back at the front door. For the rest of the day, I sat at the kitchen table while everyone went in and out, and the conversation kept circling, but nobody had an answer. My uncle was sure it was coyotes. My grandfather brought up the mountain lion he was sure had been spotted 2 summers earlier. And my mom said it was probably a stray dog. The conversations were heated and dramatic for a few hours, but nobody came back to me. I thought I would be interrogated, but I wasn't. What I think happened, and I don't know this for sure, but I have thought a lot about it, is that everybody had picked a story and my story didn't fit. The easy answer was just a wild animal. The solution to that would just be to hunt it or call animal control. But if it was something else, something that had to kneel down to eat, like a person, it became a bit more complicated. By the next afternoon, my uncle had pulled his rifle out of the gun safe at his house and set it across his lap on the porch, and he sat there until dark. The night after that, he was out there again, and the night after that. Within a week, he had set up a pop-up tent in the clearing behind his house and was starting to sleep in it with the rifle next to him. My aunt would come over to my house and sit at the kitchen table with my mom, talking about how to get him to come back inside. She would cry sometimes, and my mom would put her hand on her sister's hand and not have anything to say. I went back to school the day after the rest of the family found Sisyphus. There was nobody at my school I could have explained any of this to, and I'd still been sleeping badly since the ridge. But after Sisyphus, it got worse, and the worse it got, the less I trusted what I was seeing. After about a week, I was tired enough that I had an idea. After school, I texted Daryl, "Hey, you want to go take a look at that cave?" He didn't text back for almost an hour, but when he did, it said, "Okay, when?" We picked the next weekend. When the next weekend came around, Daryl met me on the dirt path between our houses around 2 in the afternoon. He had his backpack on, with what I figured was a water bottle in it, and probably a knife somewhere, knowing him. He was wearing his Cardinals cap backwards and his beat-up Carhartt. I had my notebook and a flashlight, even though it was the middle of the day. "Where's your dad at?" "Out at that dang tent. He was out there when I got up, like before sunrise. My mom said he came inside for 10 minutes around midnight for coffee, and he didn't even sit down. He made it in the to-go cup and walked back out." "Has he been talking about anything?" "Oh, he talks about Sisyphus, that's all. Keeps going back to him, like he's still figuring out what happened. He won't talk about going back to work. He's missed, I think, 4 days now, and my mom keeps telling him he can't sleep out there forever, and he just kind of looks at her and doesn't answer. It's freaking her out. It's freaking me out." "I'm sorry about that, dude. That's not your fault. It's Sisyphus. He raised that dog from a puppy, my dad. He used to keep him in his hoodie pocket when he was tiny. He used to sneak him bits of ribeye under the table at Thanksgiving. He took it personal that something got him, and now he's out there since he thinks if he doesn't kill whatever it was, he's letting Sisyphus down. Hell, I doubt he'd react like that if it was me that got killed." He punched me on the shoulder. We laughed. We walked out the path past my parents' house and past the old chicken coop my grandma had stopped using when I was 11. Once we were past my uncle's yard, we went into the trees. Daryl had been to the spot under the 2 oaks before, back when we were younger and would build forts together, but he hadn't been past it in a while. "You sure it was the ridge with the deer trail and not the one farther down?" "Yeah, the one you take off past the dry creek, past where the deer trail forks left, and there's that broken down fence post Papa never moved." Right, okay, I think I know which one you're talking about. Man, I haven't been up that high in a while, not since we were like 10 or 11. Me neither. Well, until last weekend. We climbed slow and careful. The leaves were brown and crunchy on the ground, and the air had that famous southern Missouri autumn bite. Daryl walked with his hands in his hoodie pocket, and I had mine in my jeans. About 10 minutes from my tree, a feeling hit me. It's hard to describe, but it was like someone standing too close behind you in the checkout line, when the back of your neck and the tops of your shoulders go hot with the awareness of someone next to you. This was that same pressure, but there was no one behind me, and yet it was on me from all sides at once. I stopped on the trail. Daryl was a few feet ahead, and he stopped a second after I did. He turned around. "Tell me you feel that." I nodded. "Yeah, I do. How long you been feeling it yourself?" "Probably 10 minutes, maybe a little more. Started feeling it back where the trail bent past that big rock, the one shaped like a shoe. So you believe me now, that it's more than just being creeped out?" "Yeah, actually. I think there's something more to it." As we continued, the deer trail switched back twice, and we lost it once but found it again. I remembered the place where it forked off the main path, and I remembered the slope, and we found those 2 oaks where I'd left them. The seat between the roots was full of dry leaves now. The cave was on the other side of the hollow. We had to come down out of my tree, cross the bottom of the hollow on a slope of leaves and exposed limestone, and climb the other hill. It took us about 20 minutes from leaving my tree to standing on the opposite hillside, and another 5 for us to find the cave opening, since coming up at it from below is a different angle than I'd been looking at it from across the hollow. The cave mouth was at the base of a limestone shelf that stuck out of the hillside about chest high above the slope. The shelf above it overhung by a foot or 2, so you could see how the rain would have run off it and not down into the cave itself. The opening of the rock was clean of moss in a halo, where everywhere else on the limestone was green with it. There was a smell coming out of that cave. It wasn't terribly strong, just a low, sour smell. Made me think of meat being left out. We could only really smell it when the wind was pushing out of the opening at us. It was kind of like the cave was breathing. We stood about 20 feet from the opening, and we didn't get closer than that. Dread had been building up between us since the watched feeling had hit, and I could definitely say it was at its full weight now. My stomach felt heavy, and my hands were cold inside my pockets. Daryl was breathing heavily through his nose. Both of us were looking at the cave. The first 10 or 12 feet of the cave floor got the afternoon sunlight, but past that, the sun stopped and the dark started, with a sharp line between them. There was something on the floor of the cave, in the strip of ground right at the line where the sun stopped. It was white, and it was bumpy, like somebody had spilled a bag of something onto the floor but never cleaned it up. It took us maybe 10 seconds to figure out we were looking at bones. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The white, bumpy strip was bones, small ones at the edge of the light, curved fragments and joints. Past them, the bones got bigger and more numerous. A foot or 2 into the dark, the floor was just bones, as far as my eye could follow. And those bones went on until the cave bent and I could no longer see. A sound came a few seconds after we figured out the bones. A wet sound, halfway between chewing and tearing. The cave walls bounced to the echo around and made the source impossible to pin down. It was somewhere in there. Could be 100 feet away, could be 20. There was that tearing underneath it, with a faint clicking sound, and the wet sound got stronger. I looked over at Daryl, and I found him already looking at me. I was sure we both had the same expression. We turned around at the same time, and we walked back down along the trail. We power walked instead of running, and we didn't speak until we made it across the hollow, once we were on top of my ridge again, past the 2 oaks. By then the cave was hidden behind the slope again, and we felt safer. We stopped then. Daryl sat down with his hands on his knees and his head down. I sat in the leaves a few feet away. What was that? I don't know, man. I'm being serious. I'm being completely serious right now. What was that, dude? What did we just look at? What did we hear? I mean, you heard it too, right? I did. And I'm telling you, I have no idea. You've been on this property your whole life. I'm just a freshman in high school who reads fantasy books. I don't know what's in caves. What did we just hear in there? Could that be a bear? Bears aren't pale, they're not thin, they don't stand at the mouth of caves like a person, and they don't wave at people. You're saying what was in there just now was the same thing you saw that day. That's what I'm saying. It gave off the same vibe. Well, I guess that makes sense. It's gotta be the same thing, right? You saw it go back in there that time. There's only one, though, right? Not multiple? I really freaking hope there's only one. He pulled at the leaves at his feet. He picked up a curled brown one and crumbled it between his fingers. "We can't tell my dad. I mean, he's already out there with a rifle. He's losing it, man. He's been gone for 2 days at a stretch eating jerky he packed himself. Mom's been finding empty Pringles cans in the laundry. He came home yesterday with a scratch on his arm, and he wouldn't say where it came from. He can't know about a cave full of bones, man. He'll go straight to it. He'll walk straight in there with the rifle thinking he's going to take care of the situation. Yep, we can't tell him. My lips are sealed. And we can't tell your parents either. Your dad would tell my dad. That's how those two are. They tell each other everything. Your dad'll be on his porch with a Coors 30 seconds after you tell him. I'm not going to tell my parents anything, I promise. This is just between us." "Good. My dad ain't ready to leave the woods. I can't make him leave the woods. I've been trying. My mom's been trying too. He just doesn't listen to us no more. Maybe I can talk him into going to town for a couple days. I don't know. I'll try something. But if I can't get him out of here, he's going to be back in there. He's going to find that cave eventually." At some point, we got up and walked back along my dad's path, and we came out at the clearing behind my house. From there, we split up. Daryl went towards his dad's house, and I went home to eat the dinner my mom had kept warm. The week after we went to the cave, that exhaustion I'd been dealing with got worse, and it was starting to scare me. I'd been a good sleeper my whole life, the kind of kid who went to bed at 10 and would wake up at 7 feeling exactly right. But after the cave, that changed. I would lie in bed for hours without going to sleep. I'd feel myself drifting off, almost getting there, but then snap back awake, with my heart racing. Most of the night I just looked at the ceiling, ending up asleep for maybe an hour near morning, after I'd given up trying. That tiredness showed up during the day. I felt heavy and my mind was foggy, like I was wearing an invisible, oversized, drenched coat. My grades started slipping by the 3rd week. Mr. Casey, my algebra teacher, asked me after class one day if everything was okay at home, and I said things were fine. In 4th period English, we were reading The Most Dangerous Game out loud, going around the room, a paragraph at a time. I hadn't been paying enough attention. I closed my eyes for what I thought was just a second, but when I opened them, Mrs. Parson was on the floor in front of her desk. She was on her back, and that pale thing from the cave was on top of her, crouched over her chest. Its head was down in her stomach, and that wet noise from the cave was now coming out of her, coming from that thing's mouth. Her shirt was open, and the front of her was open under the shirt. There was so much blood. Her hands were going up and down at her sides in small panicked twitches, like she was trying to do something with them, but couldn't. I screamed and jumped up then, the desk falling over sideways in front of me. The whole class turned and looked at me. Mrs. Parson was at the front of the room with her book open in her hands now, in one piece, perfectly okay. She looked at me worried and asked if I was all right and whether I needed to see the nurse. I said no. I sat down at my desk and apologized. My face felt really hot, partially from fear and partially from embarrassment. The kid behind me, whose name was Caden, picked up my desk for me. I told everybody I'd had a bad dream and woke up wrong, and the reading kept going. I sat there the rest of that period with my hands flat on my desk and my eyes on Mrs. Parson. She kept teaching. The bell rang, and we left. By the end of the week, there had been 2 more incidents like it. One time was in the cafeteria. I'd closed my eyes for what was probably 1 second to rest, but when I opened them, that pale thing was crouched on a cafeteria table 8 feet from me. A kid I knew named Wesley was on his back on the table, his arm pulled out of his shoulder. The thing had Wesley's arm in its mouth and was chewing through muscle at the top of it. All the while, Wesley was making a high-pitched air sound that was not a scream, but desperately wanted to be one. I dropped my tray. The crash made the tables around me look up. When I looked back, Wesley was at his own table the next row over, eating tater tots, and the pale thing was gone. The other time was in the hallway before homeroom. The janitor was mopping the floor outside my locker. I had my locker open and was looking at my books, and when I closed the locker door, The janitor was on his back on the wet floor, and that pale thing had its face in his neck. I dropped my backpack. When I looked again, the janitor was up the hallway pushing his mop bucket, as though nothing had happened. I began having trouble looking at anything for too long. I would look up at the chalkboard and think, if I look away for 1 second and look back, that pale thing is going to be there in front of me, eating Mrs. Parson again. And I was so scared that at some point I would look away and look back, but nothing would change this time. It would still be there, eating. I even began to avoid eye contact in the hallway, taking longer routes between classes that kept me near big windows and out of dim places. I told my mom I might be coming down with something, so I wouldn't have to explain why I was so tired and acting so weird. I don't remember falling asleep that night, but I had a dream. I was standing at my bedroom window in the middle of the night, in the same position I'd been in when I saw that thing in the yard with Sisyphus. The window was open, and the screen was in. The yard was lit by the porch light and the street light by the road, brighter than it should be in real life. The pale thing was crouched in the same patch of grass it had been before, in the same posture, with its head down. This time it had heard me, and it looked up. Its face was so black. Every feature you would expect, eyes, nose, and mouth, seemed instead to be black voids, and its skin was bone white, the mouth full of small black teeth. And it smiled at me. That's when it lifted up the thing it had been gnawing on. It held it out toward me too, palms open, wanting me to see. It was the top half of my dad's head, everything else concave and hollowed out. I started trying to rip the screen out of the window, pulling at it with both hands and hitting it with my fists. The screen was old aluminum. I was screaming my dad's name. The pale thing was watching me try to get the screen out, and it was still smiling, and I think it was waiting for me to come through. I woke up then. I was sitting in my bed, and I'd been screaming in real life. My mom was at the doorway with the hall light on behind her, out of breath. Honey, I'm right here. It's okay. Look at me. You're okay. I'm right here," she said as she sat down on the bed next to me and put her hand on my back. The other hand went to my forehead, reminding me of when I was little and sick. I sat there with my comforter bunched up in my fists, and I tried to slow my breathing. She rubbed circles on my back with her thumb. "You had a nightmare, honey, that's all. You're okay." "Where's Dad? Where's Dad? Is Dad okay?" Yes, he is. I just left him in the bed. Are you okay?" "I don't know, Mom. Is it the Sisyphus stuff, or maybe something going on at school?" "I don't know, Mom. I just know I woke up screaming. I'm sorry I woke you up. Honey, don't apologize for that. You don't have to be sorry. You're allowed to have nightmares, it's okay. But are you having a lot of nightmares? Be honest with me." "No." "Are you sure? I've heard you up in the night a lot recently. Are you sleeping okay?" "Yes, Mom, everything's fine, I promise. And it was just one nightmare. I don't even know what it was about." She looked at me for a long moment, then she said okay and kissed my forehead. She got up and went back down the hall, bidding me goodnight. I know she didn't believe me, but I think she could also tell that pushing on it anymore wasn't going to get us anywhere. That weekend, my uncle came back from the woods. He had been spending most of his time out there since Sisyphus, going further out each time. My aunt told my mom he had walked out to the back of the property with his rifle one morning at first light, that she had not seen him since. By the second day, he had been gone almost 30 hours. My dad and Grandpa were getting ready to go look for him when he just came out of the trees behind his house. He was alone, and he didn't have his rifle anymore. He was walking with both arms held tight against his chest, his hands tucked under the opposite armpits. It looked like he was freezing, and he was even shaking like he was. And he wasn't talking. My aunt got to him first and put her hands on his face. Doug, baby, look at me. Are you hurt? Did something happen out there? Doug, please look at me." She had her hands on his face, and he wouldn't focus on her. His eyes were going past her shoulder somewhere, out into the trees behind the house. My grandfather and my dad came up after, and I came last. My dad spoke to him. "Doug, hey, look here, brother, talk to me. Tell me what happened." My dad got down lower and tried to get under my uncle's line of sight, but my uncle's eyes kept sliding away. My grandfather walked around to my uncle's other side, putting a hand on the back of his neck. "Doug, was it an animal?" my grandpa asked. "Did something jump you out there? Just nod for me if it was an animal, son. You don't have to talk right now, just nod." But my uncle didn't nod. "Doug, please," my father begged. We got him into a kitchen chair we pulled out onto the porch, and we all stood there around him. He was shivering still, keeping his hands under his armpits. He didn't seem injured anywhere that we could see. There was dirt at his hairline, and his clothes were filthy from a night outdoors, but that was it so far. When he sat down, he did so slowly, and after he was all the way down, he pulled his hands out from under his armpits, and he held them out for us to see. He was missing 3 fingers, 2 from his right hand, and 1 from his left. The stumps were short and clean, not jagged, like whatever had taken them had done so in a single swipe or bite. My aunt screamed. My dad got down on the porch and held my uncle's face, while my grandfather went into the house to dial 911. My aunt was on the floor crying into my uncle's shoulder, and he was looking at his hands like they weren't even his. The ambulance arrived in about 20 minutes. The EMTs got my uncle into the back, and my aunt rode with him while my dad followed in his truck. Daryl and my grandparents and my mom and I stayed at the house. My grandmother made coffee. Daryl kept asking the adults if his dad was going to be okay. I had never seen him so scared. My uncle was admitted that night. They had no real explanation for him at the hospital. They cleaned the wounds and gave him fluids and antibiotics. They ran scans on his head. He still wouldn't talk to anybody. They kept him for 2 days for observation, and on the 3rd day, my aunt and Daryl checked into a Hampton Inn near the hospital. My uncle finally said that he could not go home. The night after my aunt and Daryl left for the Hampton Inn, I woke up. The clock on my dresser said 3:42 a.m. The lights in my room were off, except for the street light outside, coming in through the curtains. I hadn't closed them completely. My bedroom door was shut, and I could hear my mom and dad talking in their bedroom down the hall. Low voices. I couldn't tell what they were saying. As I woke up, I felt it before I saw it. Something was in the corner of my room. The corner was the dark corner, where my dresser stood against the wall and the streetlight didn't reach. Whatever was in that corner was crouched on the floor next to the dresser, with its head turned toward me. I couldn't see it well. The corner was dark, but I could make out a pale, crouched shape with the head pointed in my direction. I knew instantly. I knew before I even sat up in bed. I was so very tired down to my bone, but I wasn't afraid. I was angry. I had nothing left in me to be afraid with. I sat up and looked at it across the room, and it looked back at me. I couldn't see its eyes, but I could feel which direction its head was pointed. "Why are you here? Why are you tormenting my family?" I said, wanting to shout, but also not wanting my parents to come in here. But the entire time I thought it was another dream, another hallucination. The thing in the corner began to move. It moved its head, and then it spoke. The voice was higher pitched than a man's voice, and it said, "You never said hello." I sat there, the comforter at my waist, my hands on the edge of the mattress. It was just a dream, I thought, but it didn't feel like the usual dream. "Hello," I said. My voice came out shaky and weak. "Hello. I'm sorry, hello." In the corner, the shape moved again. From the little I could make out, I think it smiled. The smile was a small white bend in the dark. Then I watched it stand up. My room was about 8 or 9 feet at the ceiling, and as it stood, it had to lower its head. It walked over to my window. The window was open only about 6 inches, and the screen was still in. It pushed the screen out effortlessly, and it went headfirst through that tiny opening. The opening was too narrow for something the size of a person, but somehow it went through anyway. And then it was gone. I sat motionless in my bed. I knew then I was supposed to be very afraid, as I realized this was no dream. But even then, after that realization, I felt nothing but tired. But instead of trying to go to sleep just yet, I got out of bed and I went to my window. I closed it and locked it. I pulled the curtains closed and I turned on every light in my room. Then I went back to the window and peered outside through the curtain. There was nothing there. It's been a year since all this happened. My uncle eventually did come home, but he moved my aunt and Daryl out of our family acreage, into some house on the other side of Springfield, and he doesn't come back to visit. Daryl does come back without him sometimes on holidays. My uncle has never told us what happened out there in the woods. And for us, nothing else has happened. I've slept fine since that night. That watched feeling has stopped. I've not gone walking past my uncle's old house since. But to this day, I wish I'd only waved back. I really enjoyed this story. Turns the whole "don't reply to voices in the woods" thing on its head. Apparently, if you're simply too rude to those things from beyond, well, an uncle might end up losing a finger. Good night. Thank you all so much for tuning in to Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. I wrote and narrated a brand new creepypasta that's been fully produced over at Eerie.fm in my premium members-only podcast, Delete After Reading. So if you can't wait for more scary stories narrated by me, go to Eerie.fm, sign up to be a premium member, and start listening now. And you'll be getting a lot more bonuses too, like every one of my shows ad-free for as long as you're a member, exclusive horror novels, both audiobooks and ebooks, and more. That's Eerie.fm. Thank you. Till next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one. A new episode of Fractured Reality, hosted by yours truly, is available now over at Eerie.fm, but it's only for premium members. The episode features encounters with real-life glitches in our world, specifically a glitch where a pilot is told there is someone on board who simply does not exist. Catch the disappearing person at 35,000 feet on Eerie.fm right now, members only. Sign up to be a premium member for tons of extra stories only for my supporters, or just head over to listen to all your favorite EerieCast shows in one cozy place. We're taking creepypasta submissions right now for a contest until the end of May. First prize gets $1,000, second and third get $300. To participate, go to Eerie.fm/contest, make sure you have an account and log in, and send us your best original and scariest creepypasta. Looking forward to it. What makes deer so unnerving? I think it's their eyes. Big, dark, staring eyes that see beyond what they look at. It forces you to feel as if you're prey along with them. This story sent to me by Simply Ryan, called The Deer in My Backyard, is a disturbing and strange tale. In it, a man discovers his father's new obsession with taxidermied deer, which he sets up outside in the yard. But there's a very good reason they face away from his father's house. Something else is out there, and it wants in. My father took up taxidermy when I was about 10. He had been a hunter since he was a kid. He loved going out alone before dawn and coming back at mid-morning with a deer on the front of his truck and a thermos of coffee that had gone cold by then, which he'd never finished. He started doing his own shoulder mounts to save the cost of paying the taxidermist in town, and the first few were, well, I'll just say rough. The eyes always looked demonic. That's the way I'd put it, and he hated it when I said that. The ears also were lopsided. But he kept at it. By the time I was a teenager, he was doing other people's deer too, for $50 a head, and he was reasonably good at it. I mean, he never made his living off of it, but he had a sideline for years. He stopped hunting about 18 months before any of what I'm going to tell you. He didn't say why, never did. I asked him on the phone one Sunday, and the most I could get him to say was he got tired of it. I asked him a couple of weeks later, and he said the same thing. So I just didn't ask anymore. He was 68 by then. I figured he had earned the right to be tired of anything he wanted to be tired of. When I was a kid, I spent hours in the garage with him while he worked. I would sit on a stool in the corner and watch him and ask him questions about what he was doing. Sometimes so many questions he would get a little bit irritated. But most of the time he was game. He would tell me about which side of the hide to flesh first, and how to set the earbuds, and what the difference was between a tanning agent or a preservative. He let me handle the fleshing knife when I was 11, and he let me attempt my first mount when I was 14, a squirrel I'd killed with my BB gun. It wasn't very good. A cousin of mine called it Frankenstein's squirrel, but my dad told me I would get better at it if I kept at it. I didn't keep at it. By the time I was 16, I'd moved on to cars, music, and of course, girls. So the garage was his alone again. He never seemed to mind too much. He just kept doing his work. I'm his only son. I have a sister who lives in San Diego and has not been back to see mom or dad in 4 years. My wife and I live about 90 minutes from the place I grew up, in a small house I bought before we got married. My wife does clerical work. I work in motor vehicle parts. We have 2 boys, who I'll call C and E. C is 11 and Eli is 7. I hadn't been back to my dad's house in about a year when my mom fell. She had been carrying laundry up from the basement. She missed the second step from the top, and she came down on her left hip on the landing. Dad heard her fall and ran to her. Turned out her hip was broken in 2 places. They had her in surgery that night, 3 days in the hospital. The orthopedic surgeon told her she would need 6 to 12 weeks of careful recovery, and she would not be able to use stairs or carry anything heavier than a coffee cup, and she would need somebody around for the first month or so. Now, Dad was capable of helping her with most of it, but he was 69 and had his own bad knee. Truth was, he wasn't going to be able to bend her socks on for her or get her in and out of the tub, and that's just a couple of basic things. My wife and I discussed it heavily one night. She worked for the school system and had the summer off. The boys had summer break too. I had some vacation banked and FMLA available, so we agreed to go up for 3 weeks. After that, we convinced my sister to fly out from San Diego for a week. After that, we would have to figure out home care if Mom still needed it. The house had 2 spare bedrooms. It would work. It wouldn't be fun, but it would work. I called Dad the next morning to tell him we were coming. He said good and that he appreciated it, and that he'd see us Friday. Now, the 2 of us had been having phone calls every 2 or 3 weeks for the past year, and he never really talked about much, so I wasn't really prepared for what I saw when I got there. My dad's house is at the end of a gravel road 3 miles off the state highway. The road climbs the side of a low ridge and crosses a creek twice on a 1-lane bridge. The trees on both sides are mostly maple and hickory, with some white pine mixed in. There are 4 houses on the road, including my dad's. He has 37 acres at the end of it, most of it woods, with a clearing of about 4 acres where the house and the barn and the outbuildings are. The driveway turns off the gravel road and runs up an incline for about 100 yards, which goes through hardwood trees, then opens up into a clearing. I saw the first deer where the driveway opens up. It was a 6-point buck, standing about 10 feet to the right of the driveway, on the edge of the lawn. Its eyes were glass. Its fur was matted, and a piece was missing from its left shoulder. It faced away from the house, looking out towards the woods. I slowed the truck. "What is that?" my wife said. "God, that's one of my dad's mounts." "But why is it in the yard?" she wondered. I didn't have an answer. I drove a little further. There was another one to the left of the driveway. This one was a smaller doe with 1 ear missing. Past that was another buck, in the middle of the yard near the well house. Then another. As we came up to where the driveway fully opened in front of the house, I could see the whole clearing. There were mounted deer everywhere. They were placed at intervals around the perimeter of the clearing, all of them facing outward toward the woods. I counted them as I drove. There were 12 in the front clearing alone, with more visible at the corners of the house, going around to the back. The boys were quiet in the back seat. I looked at my wife, and my wife looked back at me like, what is going on? We saw my dad sitting on the front porch. He was in his rocking chair. He'd had that thing for 30 years, a green metal rocker that had been painted 3 times. He had his hands folded in his lap. He was wearing overalls and a John Deere hat. He had his rifle leaned up against the wall behind him, in the corner between the screen door and the porch post. I parked and got out. The boys got out happily behind me, ready to stretch their legs. My wife got out and went around to the back of the truck. "Hey, Dad," I said to him. "Son?" He sounded a little hoarse. He stood up from the rocker. He came down the steps slowly, meeting me at the front of the truck. He gave me a big hug. Then he hugged the boys one at a time, then my wife. He turned around to the door. "Come on in. Your mother's been waiting for you." It was funny at the time, but he didn't say anything about the deer. I guess to him it was just decor. We unloaded the truck. I took the bags up to the spare bedrooms. That house had not changed in the year since I'd last seen it. The rugs were in the same places, photos in the same places, and the same photos. The kitchen smelled like that same brand of dish soap I grew up with. We found my dear old mother in the dining room, which had been converted into a sick room. There was a hospital bed where the table used to be, and there was a walker beside the bed. Her left leg was in a long brace that went from her hip to her ankle. She was thinner than the last time I'd seen her. Her hair had gone wider at the part. She had her glasses on and she was sitting up, with 3 pillows propping her up. She was reading a Joyce Carol Oates paperback. "Hey, Mom, you doing okay?" Just get over here." I leaned down and she put her arms around my neck and held on for a while. The boys came in behind me. She got C's face between her hands and then E's. She held my wife's hand after that. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry about all this fuss," she said. "Oh, don't be." I gave her a smile, letting her know it was all right. "I am sorry, though." "Mom, stop. If you don't have family, who do you have?" I repeated the phrase she had told me when I was a kid. Thing is, she didn't mention the deer either. I asked her how she was feeling exactly. She told me about the surgery and the rehab schedule and the medications she was on. She told me what the physical therapist had said about her recovery. She did all of this without even mentioning that there was a dozen taxidermied deer arranged around the house and that my father was sitting on the front porch with a rifle behind him. I went back outside to help my wife with the last of the bags. The deer in the yard still faced away from us, looking out to the trees. I walked out a ways, stopping at the 6-point buck at the edge of the driveway. It was clearly my father's work. I examined the details. The eye placement was a little too high. The line of the seam down the back of the neck was visible if you looked for it. The hooves had been set in some kind of dark resin that had been formed into rough blocks, painted to look like the ground. The whole thing was secured to the lawn by what looked to be rebar stakes through the resin blocks. I bent down and felt the back of it. The hide was, in fact, real. So was the fur. It had been done by hand and finished by hand and placed here on purpose. The next one over, the doe with one ear, had clearly been out in the weather longer. Its hide was sun-bleached in places, and there was moss starting on the resin at the base. I straightened up. My wife was standing at the back of the truck holding E's stuffed rabbit. She looked at me. "We're gonna have to talk about this," she said. "Yeah, I expected as much," I replied. She put her hands on her hips. "Right now. Not in the yard." The first night I asked my dad about the deer. We were on the porch after supper. My wife was inside helping Mom get ready for bed. The boys had eaten and gone upstairs to the spare bedroom to set up their plastic animals on the dresser. C had said about 6 words at dinner. E had said maybe a dozen, and most of them were about the deer in the yard. The dog, an old beagle named Patches, who had been my mother's idea 12 years ago, was lying on the porch by my dad's feet. "So, Dad," I sat down beside him. They didn't have a spare chair, so I just kneeled on the porch. "What's with all these deer out here?" "Been working on 'em," was his simple answer. "Yeah, I can see that. But why?" "Just something to do. He cleared his throat. Sounded pretty gross. But there's so many. What do you mean, something to do? There's 14. Okay, 14. Why did you put 14 of them out here? He cleared his throat again. Well, it just feels right with them around. I don't see what the issue is. Well, I've never seen anyone do something like this before. You used to put your mounts in the den. The old man shook his head at me. I changed my mind on where I want to put them. All of them? Outside and facing the woods? He nodded. Dad, that's not normal. What's going on? He stopped and glared at me, but then his face looked more tired than irritated. I'm gonna ask you to leave that alone for tonight. You've been driving and your wife is tired, so are the boys. Your mother sure is glad to see you. We're not gonna talk about this anymore tonight. And that was that, at least for now. All right, Dad. Have a good night. You too. I'll be in a moment. Just gonna walk the property before bed. He stood up and grabbed his rifle. Oh, I can come with you if you want, I asked. He shook his head. You sure? Sure. Patches. Come on, boy. The dog got up off the porch, stretching his obviously achy joints, and trotted down the steps. My dad walked down after him. He went around the side of the house to the right and disappeared past the corner. I watched, seeing if he would come back anytime soon, but he didn't, and I figured he'd gone all the way around to the back. I'd said goodnight, but I kind of wanted to sit on the porch a bit longer. The dark came in. I could hear my dad's footsteps somewhere off in the back of the property, the crunching of gravel and leaves in an old man's gate. He came back, but it took him 40 minutes. The dog came back up the steps first. My dad came up after him. I thought you went to bed. Dad, I just wanted to make sure you're okay. Oh, I'm fine, boy. Let's get on to bed. So I went. My wife and I were in the small guest bedroom at the back of the house. The boys were in the larger spare across the hall. The bed was a double, smaller than what we had at home. My wife was lying on her side facing me. So, did you figure out anything? You wouldn't answer any questions, I told her. You had no idea about all these deer, huh? I sighed. No, I didn't. He's always mounted his own deer for a long time, but I didn't know he was sitting them in the yard. We've been on the phone almost every week. He's never said the word deer, I'm telling you. My wife rubbed her eyes. And what's he doing with that rifle right next to him all the time? I shrugged. Did you ask about that? No, hon. He said he was walking the property and he took it with him when he did it. Maybe he just does his rounds throughout the day. Rounds for what? Her hand shot up with a demand for an answer. Well, he didn't say that either. She was clearly agitated, and I couldn't blame her. My dad was being very suspicious. I don't know if we can stay here, she said. I'm not saying we go tonight. I'm saying I don't know if we can stay the whole 3 weeks, like we thought. She crossed her arms and lay in bed. I sat down next to her. I don't blame you, to be honest. Just give me a while to figure out what's going on. Okay, but try to do it quick. Your dad's freaking me out. I gave her a half smile. We went to sleep. I slept badly. I woke up around 3 with the feeling I'd heard something, so I went to the window to check. The window looked out the back of the house, across the backyard and toward the woods. There was mist coming up from the creek that ran along the back of the property. The moon was up and behind the clouds, and the light was diffuse. I could see the back fence and the tool shed, and those 2 deer that were placed near the tool shed. Seeing them again in the night out there made me worry. What was wrong with my dad? I stood at the window for a few minutes. The yard was so still and quiet. Eventually, I went back to bed. In the morning, I counted the deer again. There were 15 now. He'd added one. I walked the perimeter of the clearing to check. The new one was on the back side of the property, on the line between the backyard and the woods. It was a 4-point buck. The fur was clean and the eyes were set straight. The hide was tight on the form. It looked recent. The resin at the base was darker than the resin on the older ones. Newer. I walked over to the garage. My dad's garage is a detached building about 20 yards from the house. He built it himself in the 70s when I was a baby. It has 2 bays, the right one for the truck and the left one for his work. The work side had a long bench under the back window with shelves above it and a pegboard with his tools. The smell was the same smell I remembered from my childhood, sawdust and preservative, with a touch of machine oil on top. My dad was at the bench. He had a deer hide spread out in front of him. He was working on it with a fleshing knife. He had a respirator pushed up on his forehead, and he didn't look at me when I came in. "Hey, Dad, good morning. I noticed there was a new deer out by the tool shed." I brought it up immediately. "Mm-hmm." He focused on his work. "So, where did that one come from?" "Found it. Back of the property. Dead already." "Oh, well, what killed it?" "No idea." "You think someone shot it?" "No." "Do you think an animal got it?" Instantly, he set his knife down and stopped working on the hide. He looked out the back window of the garage, then to me. He looked stern. "I'm going to ask you again to leave this alone." I was about to speak, but he put his hand up. "I know you got questions, and I don't have answers for you that are going to be satisfying. The questions you are asking me are not questions I'm going to answer this morning. Maybe at some point in the next few weeks I'll tell you something, since you're going to be here for some time. But not this morning. I've got to get this hide cleaned before the day warms up." I rolled my eyes. "All right, Dad." I left the garage. By the end of the first weekend, I'd stopped asking my dad about the deer, and I began to watch them instead. I would count them when I could throughout the day. The count went up by 1 on Saturday night, and it went up 1 more on Monday night. By Tuesday morning, there were 18 deer. The new ones would appear usually in the morning, between the time my dad went to bed and by the time I got up to start the coffee. He went to bed around 11. I got up around 6. There was a window of about 7 hours in which a 4-point buck or an 8-point buck, or once a yearling doe, would arrive on the property and be in the backyard or beside the tool shed when I came out to look. I never once saw him place one. I never heard anything in the night either. The hides were always perfect. The eyes were always still bright. The bodies were always whole and unmarked, as if the animals had laid down on their own and let Dad take them. Our boys were acting different. E was outside most of the days. He had picked the new 4-point buck behind the tool shed as his favorite, and even named it Henry. He sat in the grass next to Henry and read out loud from his picture books. He told my wife at lunch one day that Henry liked the one about the monkey best. My wife told him it was sweet that he liked the deer, but that these deer were not toys, and that he should be respectful around his grandfather's stuff. E said he was respecting them, that they weren't toys, obviously. They were his friends. It sounds weird, but he would say it with the seriousness of a 7-year-old. So maybe it was just a kid thing, I thought. As for C, he was inside most of the time. He sat on the couch with his book or his handheld game, and he didn't want to go out. When my wife asked him if he wanted to walk down to the creek with her and E, he said no thanks. When I asked him to come help me carry the recycling out to the bin, he came out, but he kept his eyes on the ground the whole time, walking fast, and was back inside as soon as the bin lid closed. I asked him at dinner on Monday if he was feeling okay. He said he was fine. He didn't look at me, though, when he said that. "Hey, bud, you sure?" I placed a hand on his shoulder. He smirked and nodded his head. "I'm sure, Dad." "Are you sleeping okay? I know it's hard to sleep at a new place." He nodded again. "You can tell me if something is bothering you, okay?" "I'm okay, Dad," he said. I let it go. My wife caught my eye across the table. My dad was eating his pork chop and didn't look up. That Tuesday night, C had a bad dream, and he came into our room around midnight. He stood in the doorway in his pajamas, and my wife sat up, saying, "Come here, baby." He came over. He sat on the edge of the bed, and my wife put her arm around him. "Was it a bad dream? Tell me what it was about." He stared at the floor, and he said something really creepy that I tried not to take too serious. "There was a man in the woods. A tall man." "Tall like how, honey?" Tall like a tree? My wife looked at me over his head. Well, what was this tall man doing? He was looking at me. From where? From past the deer. He was past the deer in the yard. He was just standing there. The deer were between him and me. Was he doing anything else? No, he was just looking. But I could feel him looking, even before I saw him. I knew somebody was looking, and then I looked, and he was there. My wife pulled him closer, rubbing his back. It was just a dream, baby. He nestled his head into her chest. I know, Mom. You want to sleep with us tonight? Can I? They both looked at me. With a grin, I nodded. He climbed into bed between us. He went to sleep faster than I expected. I lay there in the dark for an hour after that, listening to him breathe, and listening to this house, and of course, making sure I heard any noise that might come from outside. The mist had come up from the creek again. I could see it through the curtain when I turned my head. I went out on the porch around 2 a.m. My dad was already there. He had the rifle across his lap now. He rocked in his rocker like usual, not looking at me when I came out. I asked him how long he'd been out here so far. He just gave me basic answers like, a while. Said that nothing's happened so far, even though I'm not sure what something might be. And when I asked what he was doing, he just said, same thing I do every night, son. When I asked what that was, he just rocked. I sat down on the porch step. The dog came out from somewhere and lay down next to me with his head on my thigh. The moon was up and the mist was up again, and I could see the front yard pretty clear. The deer were in their places. The closest one was the original 6-point at the edge of the driveway. The one past it was a doe with a missing ear. Past that, the yard sloped down a little, and the deer at the edge of the yard were partly hidden in the mist. I sat there with my dad watching the yard. The mist moved a little, slowly, with no wind to really push it, from what I could tell. And it was around then that I saw movement behind the deer. It was past the yard in the trees, at the edge of the woods where the property line was. It wasn't an animal moving through the trees, but something the height of those trees, or close to it, moving between them. I saw the shape of it go behind one trunk, then come out on the other side. The shape was the shape of a man, except twice as tall as a man. It did not come out into the yard, but it stayed in the trees. I lost it in the mist after a few moments. Immediately, I looked back to my dad. He was watching the same direction I'd been watching. He gripped the rifle in both hands hard, but he was not yet pointing it. He was just holding it across his lap with both hands tightly. You saw that, right? I asked him. He nodded, then said, "Go inside." When I tried to speak up, he shook his head at me and said more sternly, "Go inside now." The way he commanded me then made me feel like a kid. I listened. I went inside and I lay next to my wife and C, who was still asleep. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I lay there and I went over what I'd seen. That shape and the height of it. What in the world was that? A weird trick of the light and shadows? In the morning, my wife was up before me. She had C in the kitchen eating cereal, and E was outside, of course. My dad was in the garage again. Mom was in her bed with her physical therapist, who came 3 mornings a week. My wife sat down next to me at the kitchen table after she had cleared C's bowl. "Tell me what happened last night. You're acting weird." I told her, and I didn't leave anything out. I said exactly what I'd seen, and how oddly it resembled C's dream. Her eyes were wide and drifted off for a few seconds before she replied, "I think we need to leave." "I know," I told her. "How fast can we leave?" "Well, let me talk to my dad." "Today," she said. Today, I got it." I went out to the garage after the physical therapist left. My dad was at the bench. He was stretching a new hide over a form. He had the respirator down around his neck. "Dad, I need you to tell me what you saw last night. What I saw," I demanded from him. He set the hide down and turned toward me. "Son, I don't know what it is. I've never known. I've had a 1.5 years to figure it out, and I haven't. so I'm not holding anything back from you, I promise. I just don't know." "What are you talking about? What happened a year and a half ago?" I asked. "That's when it started. I came home from hunting and there was a deer in the yard, the front yard. A dead buck, but there was no mark on it that I could find. I called old Mason up the road. He came over and looked at it with me, and we couldn't figure out what had killed it. He thought maybe it had a heart attack. Deer do have heart attacks sometimes." I said sure. I put it in the bed of the truck and took it to the garage, and I dressed it out. A week later, there was another one, same as the first, dead and no markings. I called Mason again, and Mason did not come this time. I think he decided he didn't want to know what was going on, so I dressed that one too. The next time, it was a week after that. Then it was every couple of days. Then they started coming faster than I could process them. I had to start preserving them whole, since I didn't have the freezer space for the meat and I wasn't going to leave them to rot. After the third one I found, I saw it. I was out on the porch one night with a flashlight, trying to see if I could see what was bringing these dead deer here. I saw it at the edge of the trees for about 10 seconds. It was tall enough that I knew I was looking at something I didn't have a name for, and I could feel it watching me. I thought of C's dream then, and I tried not to let my dad see that I had shuddered. After it left, I didn't go inside for a couple of hours, since I didn't feel like I could move yet. It was such a strange sensation. When I did go inside, I told your mother. She believed me, but she didn't see it that night. However, she has seen it before. I didn't know what to say. "What is it? How often does it come here?" "I've seen it every night for the last 12 months now." He looked down at his feet. "Every night," I muttered. "Yes, every night. Sometimes for a long time, sometimes for just a few seconds. Sometimes it stays in the trees, and other times it comes out into the yard a little ways. It has never come up to the house, though. The deer in the yard are between it and the house, and it has never come past any of the deer in the yard." "Are you saying the deer keep it out?" "I'm saying it has never come past the deer in the yard. I do not know what is keeping it out. I have a theory, but I'm not sure." "What's the theory, Dad? This sounds insane and serious." I was starting to grind my teeth from stress. "It leaves me the deer. I do what is to be done with the deer, and I put the deer in the yard. The deer stays in the yard, it stays in the trees. We have a kind of arrangement, even if neither of us has spoken about it out loud, since I cannot speak to it, and I don't even know if it can speak. I'll tell you one more thing. Then I'm going to need to get back to this hide. There was a stretch in February when it did not bring a deer for 9 days. I don't know why. I had run out of work to do, so I cleaned up my garage, and I sharpened my knives. I waited. On the 6th night, I saw it standing in the front yard. Not in the trees, but in the yard, about 40 feet from the porch. It stood there for about an hour. I sat on the porch with the rifle and I watched it, watching me. After an hour, it went back into the trees. The next morning, there was a deer behind the well house. I do not know what was different about those 9 days. I do not know what brought it closer or what put it back. I've stopped trying to figure out what makes it do what it does, and I just do the work it leaves. Dad, this sounds crazy. I would be sitting here calling you crazy if I hadn't seen it myself. C has been having dreams about it. My dad looked worried then, but I continued. My wife wants to leave today. You should leave today. I've been waiting on you to say that, to be honest. You should leave too, with Mom. I'm not gonna leave. This is my house. Your mother's in this house. I'm not going to leave my house since something has set up shop in the trees. I'm going to do what I've been doing. If I have to do it for another year, I'll do it for another year. If I have to do it for 10 years, I'll do it for 10.
What does Mom think about this? I asked.
As I said, your mother has since seen it at least once. Your mother knows about it, has known it for at least a year. Your mother and I have talked about this between ourselves, and we've made our decisions.
You should have told me before I came out here.
I should have. I really should have, and I'm sorry I didn't.
I'm gonna pack up my family and leave as soon as possible, I said. He nodded. I can call Aunt Janet about coming up to help Mom for a couple of weeks, until my sister gets here.
Okay. He just kept nodding.
Dad, what if it comes inside? What even are your plans for all of this?
It hasn't come inside yet.
I know it hasn't, but what if?
I couldn't tell you.
I squeezed my eyes shut, then turned around and headed back to the house. I told my wife about the conversation, and we began to pack the boys' bags. We had been there for 4 days. I went to my mom's room. She had her glasses off and a book in her lap.
"He's told you everything, hasn't he?"
she said, seeing the look on my face. Yep. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't either of you tell me? She closed her book. You should come with us, Mom. I don't want you or Dad to be here.
I can't. You know I can't do stairs right now, and you don't have a downstairs bedroom. I'm not gonna be hauled around like a sack of potatoes. And your father's not gonna leave no matter what I say. I'm not gonna leave without him either. So that's the end of that.
Okay. I paced around the room. Well, Aunt Janet's gonna come up, cover our weeks before my sister gets here.
That's fine. I'll see Janet then. Go on. Take your boys home. And your wife.
I hugged her and kissed her on the cheek. My dad helped me carry our bags down to the truck. He didn't say much. The boys were already in there, and my wife was up at the porch saying goodbye to Mom through the open front door. Since we decided not to have the boys come in for a second goodbye, because that would set E off. The screen door was propped open with one of the rubber wedges my dad had been using for the screens. He put the last bag in the bed of the truck, and he stood there with his hand on the tailgate. I'll call you when I get home, I told him.
If you ever change your mind about staying, the spare bedroom is yours.
I know that, and thank you, but I think we have to go.
Well, y'all take care. Sorry, son.
It's all right, Dad. Love you. He pulled me into a hug. My wife came down the steps past him and got in the truck. I got in too. I backed out of the driveway and turned the truck around in front of the house. The deer in the yard were in their places still. My dad was on the porch in his rocker then. He started to cry when we got to the end of the driveway. He wanted to bring Henry home with us. I told him Henry had to stay with Granddad. He kept crying for 20 minutes after we got on the gravel road. By the time we hit the state highway, he was quiet, looking out the back window. C sat in the front passenger seat next to me. My wife was in the back with E. Suddenly, my wife asked the boys if they wanted to stop at Wendy's. So we stopped at Wendy's, and the boys ate, and we drove on. We got home around 8 that night. I carried E up to bed, since he had fallen asleep in the car. C went up by himself. He hugged me at the bottom of the stairs first, which he hadn't done in over a year. I held on to him for a few seconds. I enjoyed that. Then he went up. My wife and I sat in the kitchen, not saying much, but we had a glass of wine each. She went to bed before I did. I sat at the kitchen table for another hour, then called my dad. I told him we were home. He was happy about that, and said that Mom was sleeping at the moment. I let him know I'd call him tomorrow, told him to be careful. As promised, Aunt Janet came up that next week. She's my mother's younger sister, 65 and divorced, and retired. She stayed for 10 days. After that, my sister finally arrived, and she was there for the rest of my mom's recovery. My mother was back on her feet by the middle of the summer. She used a cane for another couple of months. By fall, she was walking the property without any help. I called my dad every week.
He didn't bring up the deer, and neither did I. We talked about my mom's recovery and my work and the boys. I asked him after about a month if he was still doing the same thing, and he told me yes. I asked him if it was the same as before. He said it was. And I asked if he'd been sleeping okay, or at all. And of course, it was the usual. And that's where I left it. I didn't go back up there. My wife didn't want to go, and she didn't want me to take the boys anymore. We talked about having Mom and Dad come down for a long weekend once Mom was strong enough to make the trip. But my mom didn't want to leave the house for that long, and Dad would not leave it at all. So we kept it over the phone. C was different that summer and into the fall. He slept with his door open and the hallway light on. He didn't want to be alone in the basement to do laundry. He was sleeping with the door closed again by the middle of fall. He never asked me about the tall man, and I think he made a decision at some point that he was never going to ask, that he wanted to try to forget it. E took longer. He talked about the deer for weeks after we got home, then about Henry the deer specifically. Henry liked the picture book about the monkey. Henry liked the song E's first grade class had learned about a frog. Henry was a good listener. My wife told him gently after a while that Henry was at Granddad's house, and E could think about him, but he had to do his other things. E said okay, but I'm not sure we got through to him. He drew Henry at school. He drew Henry standing in our backyard, even though Henry had never been in our backyard. He drew an outline around Henry that was the shape of a person who was bigger than the deer, as if the person was made of mist or air. His teacher called my wife about these drawings, and my wife told her E had been at the grandfather's house and his grandfather did taxidermy, that we thought this was his way of processing it. The teacher bought that. I say bought, but really a lot of that is true. About 3 months after we got home, he said something weird, something that worried me. It came out of nowhere. I think it would be nice not to have any insides, like Grandpa's deer, like Henry. My wife and I both stopped eating. Buddy? I said. Why would you think that would be nice? 'Cause then you don't have to be scared of anything getting at your insides. I gulped. E, nothing's gonna be getting at your insides, son. I just think it would be nice, he smiled. I'm not saying I want it. I'm just saying it would be nice. My wife asked him if anything was making him scared lately, and he said no. She asked if anything was making him think about these insides, and that was a no as well. He went back to his spaghetti, and he didn't bring it up again. Not that I know of. One evening I got home after 6. My wife had made meatloaf. The boys had already eaten. C was in his room with his books, and E had asked if he could play in the backyard for a while, before his bath. My wife told him yes. It was already dark by then, but our backyard was inside the porch light, and Eli was a kid who liked being outside. We'd been letting him have his half hour before bed since we got home. My wife called him in for his bath around 7:30, but he didn't come. She called again, then she went to the back door and called him from there. He still didn't come. Aggravated, I got up from the couch. I don't like it when the boys disobey their mother. I went to the back door. E was standing in the middle of the backyard with his back to me. He was facing the line of trees that separates our property from the property behind ours, and he wasn't moving. E, you okay, bud? Mom said to come inside. Yeah, Dad, he said without looking at me. I'm coming. But he didn't move. Right now, E, okay? I'm coming, he said. He stood there for another few seconds. Then he turned and walked toward me. He was a small shape inside the circle of the porch light. He came up the steps, and he looked up at me as he walked past into the kitchen. Henry's home, he said. What? I went out into the yard. I was flabbergasted. The deer was at the back edge of our lawn, where the grass ends and the tree line starts. It was facing the house. It was Henry, sure enough, just as I'd remembered him from Dad's house. And now his resin block at the hooves was anchored into our lawn, using the same rebar stakes that I'd seen at my dad's. I walked up to it, and I stood in front of it. This was brought here, and placed here. It was facing the back door of my house, and there was only one person that could do this. I walked around the side of the house. There was a mount in the side yard, too, between our house and the chain link fence that separates our property from the neighbors.
This one was a doe, also facing the house. Then I walked around to the front. Another one in the front yard near the mailbox, also facing the house, and another one at the corner of the lawn near the driveway, facing our house. I walked the entire perimeter. There were 6 in total, placed roughly evenly around our quarter-acre lot. 2 in back, 1 on each side, and 2 in the front. Every one of them was anchored in the lawn, with the same resin and the same stakes, all facing towards our home. I went back inside. My wife was at the sink rinsing E's spaghetti plate from earlier. He'd eaten after going back in. I must have been out there for about 20 minutes. "Hey babe, are you okay?" "I think we need to take the boys upstairs," I told her. She looked at me with an eyebrow raised, but she didn't ask a question. She dried her hands in a hurry and went to the foot of the stairs, calling for C. C came down. She put her hand on his shoulder and steered him back up the stairs. Then she picked up E, who was sitting on the kitchen floor with one of his plastic horses, and carried him up after C. I went to the kitchen phone and called my dad. "Dad, what in the world?" I said as soon as I heard him pick up.
What's wrong?
"Your mounted deer appeared in my yard. Did you do this?" Immediately, he sounded very concerned.
Son, I haven't moved any mounts off my property. Are they facing toward the road?
No, Dad, they're facing toward the house. I could hear him swallow deeply from the other end of the phone.
Listen to me very carefully. You need to turn those deer around. Right now. As fast as you can. Do you understand?
I hear you. I heard my wife make a sound at the top of the stairs. It wasn't a scream, but it was almost one. The boys were behind her. She pointed to the street. I looked outside. I could barely breathe. Dad, there is no street. I'm looking out the window right now. There is no street anymore. No neighbor's house, nothing out there beyond the yard.
Okay, I'm getting the truck right now. I'll be there in an hour. Do not go outside.
He hung up. Oh God, I thought. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time. My wife was at the top with E on her hip and C behind her. C had his hand on the back of her sweater. He wasn't looking at anything. His face looked like it had gone slack. I called them downstairs to the living room. They came. E was wriggling around and asking to be put down. He was saying he had to go back outside, saying he had to see Henry. My wife was holding him with both arms, saying no, he could not do that. We got them both to the living room couch. My wife sat down with them. E was crying and twisting, and C was sitting next to her, so motionless and emotionless. It was then that a long, low moaning sound came from outside, like a sick and dying cow. It came from somewhere out past the back of the house. It went on for about 5 seconds and stopped abruptly. A moment later, another moan came, this one out past the front of the house, deeper than before. A third one came after. None of them sounded like the same animal as the others. They all sounded different, like various animals in different stages of torment. C let go of his mother then. He slid sideways off the couch and onto the rug on the floor. I expected to see him catch himself, but his shoulder hit first and then his head, gently. His eyes were closed. "See?" I ran over to him and turned him over. He was breathing, thankfully, but his eyes remained closed. I shook his shoulder and said his name, but I could get no response from the boy. I then checked his pulse to be sure. It was fine. I picked him up and put him back on the couch beside his mother. She had E pinned to her with one arm. With the other, she held C's head against her shoulder. Then the house began to fill with mist. The mist was coming in from the bottom of the back door. I saw it from the living room through the doorway in the kitchen. It was thin. It curled up off the linoleum and crept across the kitchen floor toward us in a slow line. I went to the bathroom and got the bath mat. I rolled it and jammed it against the bottom of the back door. I then went to the front door and did the same with the rug from the entryway. The mist that was already inside did not retreat. It stayed where it was, low and slow, an inch off the floor. E had stopped crying. He was looking at the back door from his mother's lap. His face had a calmness to it, and I did not like that.
"Mommy, Henry's at the back door," he said, oddly delighted.
No, you stay right here with me, okay?" she told him.
"He's at the back door waiting for me."
She had to wrestle him a bit to keep him from going. "You're staying right here."
"Mommy?"
"No, stay." The moans were constant now. They were coming from every direction around the house and did not let up. There was always at least one of them going. Sometimes two of them overlapped. These random animalistic sounds. I went over to the front window. I saw it there, standing at the edge of our yard. It was the shape I'd seen at the edge of my father's trees, except now it had nothing to compare itself to. There was no forest out here. It was just a shape in the absence past where the yard ended. It was taller than the streetlights would be on a normal night. It was the height of the second story of a house. It was facing us. After a few seconds, it took a step. It came onto our lawn. I went to the side window in the dining room. There was a shape there too, at the side edge of the yard. It was stepping onto the lawn at the same time. I went to the back window. There was a shape at the back edge of the yard too. I don't know if it was the same shape in 3 places at once, or 3 different shapes. Don't know why I bothered. This thing made no sense. E was off his mother's lap suddenly, running across the kitchen toward the back door. "E!" he kept going. "E, stop!" I called to him. He had his hand on the doorknob, and he was turning it. I got to him in a heartbeat and pulled him off the door. The door came open about an inch as I pulled him off. Mist flooded in through that inch, and the second the door was open, this mist was so much thicker, and it brought with it a sort of smell, a smell like dead animal. I shut the door quickly and threw my weight against it. I got E under my left arm, and he was screaming and fighting me. Screaming for Henry, saying over and over that Henry was at the door waiting, and we were being rude not to let him in. The figure at the front window was halfway across the front yard now. I could see it through the living room window from where I was holding the back door shut. It was walking at a steady and calm pace. No hurry, whatever it was. The mist was now up to my knees. Tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't know what to do. That was when the figure at the front of the house stopped, right at our front porch. It leaned over, and it put its face to the front window. I turned away. I did not want to look at that face. I had my back to the window, and I had E under my arm, the back door at my shoulders. I saw the bottom of the thing's figure framed in the front window when I looked. That had to be its legs. The legs were man-like, but stretched. The skin looked gray and wet, and the feet were bare and stretched too. I'm so glad I never saw that face. It continued to bend down, putting its face level with the window perfectly, and I kept looking at the floor. I heard it tap at the window then, so it had fingers, I assumed, but I did not look. The thing tapped 3 times. Was that its way of knocking? Another form was at the back door too. I could feel it through the door against my back, a pressure on the door. Light, but present. Not yet pushing. I doubted I could overpower something like that. The moaning was at a fever pitch. My wife was screaming, C was unconscious, E was screaming at me to let him go outside to Henry, and I think I was shouting, but I couldn't hear myself anymore. All at once, sunlight broke through the windows, and all the noises stopped. I looked up. I could see through the window and past the yard. No more void. It wasn't even night anymore. "What just happened?" my wife asked from the other room. I could barely answer. I don't know." We stayed where we were for several minutes. There was no telling what was going on. Was it getting better? Getting worse? Was it a trick? I carried E to the couch and laid him next to his mother. He wasn't frantic anymore all of a sudden. Whatever had possessed him was gone, and he looked confused, even scared. I went to the front door then. I pulled the rug away from the bottom of the door, and I opened it. There I saw my dad's truck in the driveway. It was parked at a weird angle, as if he had stopped in a hurry. The front tire was up on the lawn, the driver's side door standing open still. I could see from there even the keys were in the ignition and the dome light was on, dim in the morning sun. In the passenger seat was his John Deere hat. Henry, the deer, was beside the truck. Henry was now facing the other way, facing out toward the street. The resin block at his feet had been pulled out of the ground and reset. The grass around the block was disturbed and torn. Whoever had done it in a hurry. I walked around the house. The other 5 mounts were still facing the house, still facing us. It was only Henry that had been turned. Henry, who was by my father's abandoned truck. I could breathe again. The street was back, the neighbors' houses were back, the sun was here. The only thing that wasn't here and back to normal was my dad. The police were called, and I called my mother, pleading that he was somehow there, that maybe his truck had made it here on its own accord. But no, he had done what he said he would do. She said that he had driven down in the night. She knew that we were in danger, but she didn't know the exact situation. And I told her the truth, that his truck was here, but he was not. Before the police arrived, I went back outside and pulled the rebar stakes out of every resin block, dragging those 6 mounts into the garage, one at a time. I put them under tarps in the back. When the police arrived, it was something that I did not want to talk about or explain. I went back out then and stamped the displaced ground flat with my boot. Then I went back in, and I sat with my family until the officer arrived. We could not speak of the events, obviously, but we told him that Dad had driven down here, and yet we couldn't find him. The officer asked about any memory issues, how mentally aged he was. But I told him the truth. My dad was healthy, stable. The officer went out to the truck then and examined it for a while. The authorities searched for my dad. Dogs and people of all sorts scoured the surrounding blocks and my yard. Divers in the nearby creek searched too. Apparently, state troopers went to my mom's house and searched all around there too. For a while, his picture was in the news, but he was never found. Not even a body. The only traces were by where Henry stood. Desperate, pushed-in footsteps, like a man trying to pry and turn a statue. Not long after this, my mother moved into an assisted living place in town. She didn't want to be in the house anymore, and she didn't like being alone. We had a memorial for my dad about a year after he was officially declared missing. The best we could do was bury an empty box in the cemetery beside his parents. The county sheriff came to the service, standing at the back of the chapel, but he didn't say a word to me afterward. Mom went on for another 2 years in that assisted living place, but she would die of a stroke. She had been sharp up to the day she went, and we talked on the phone every week. The topic of Dad and those deers was very clearly avoided. The one time the conversation veered was about a month before she died. I went to visit her in person, and out of nowhere she said, "You know, your father did what he had to do." I know, Mom. He was a very tired man. All the things he had to do at our house, he didn't want to do any of it. But he did it for us, because he had to. That's the type of man he always was. Did what he had to do. I bet you if he were here, he would do it again in a heartbeat. I hugged my mother tightly, and I tried not to sound like I was crying, despite the tears. Mom never mentioned what happened to the deer in the yard. The last time I went to their house after Mom passed to check out the property and her belongings, the deer were gone, and at every spot they had been standing, there wasn't even a mark in the ground. I hope whenever the worst happens, if it happens, I can be that kind of dad, ready to lay down my life, meet my fate for the sake of my children and family. This was a terrifying story, leaving a lot of questions to be answered. But at least there's some light knowing that true good
exists. Good night. This has been Unexplained Encounters. I've been your host, Darkness Prevails. You can find me on X at Dark Prevails, and you can send me your true stories of the unexplained at darkstories.org. Support what I do and unlock tons of extra narrations and stories read by me. Head over to erie.fm, that's EERIE.fm, and become a premium member. We can't keep going depending on platforms like YouTube, who might pay us one month and then not the next. So we need your help. We need as many people as possible to become premium members, so that we can be independent and create even more amazingly terrifying content for you. Plus, you get a ton of bonus goodies and more new bonuses every week for members only. Head to erie.fm. You can go there for free too, and enjoy every EerieCast show in one spot. Thank you. Until next time, everyone, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.